Chapter 878. In the end, Rue Wen's perception was extraordinary. She suddenly stopped halfway through. She stopped in front of an extremely blurry boundary and hesitated. If she went any further in, it would probably result in a bad influence. However, the summoning intent inside was very clear. Rue Wen hesitated for a second, but in the end, she still stepped forward into the area ahead. Fine waves gently rippled out, following Rue Wen's movements, forming marvelous ripples in the void. Horizontal and vertical waves rose and fell, dense and alternating. They reverberated back and forth, erasing the surface color of the mist. This scene, which was originally a relatively simple fusion of the virtual and the real, suddenly had many blurry silhouettes and colors. It was like a projection that wasn't quite successful. Layers and layers interweaved together. Rue Wen also saw that there were a few structures that were already relatively clear. They were similar to mountain peaks, rivers, buildings, and even more refined vehicles. They suddenly collapsed, and then they were reconstructed under the push of some sort of continuous but relatively chaotic force. It was just that there was already a clear difference from the scene before her. And so, Rue Wen knew that Luo Nen should have some new ideas and new harvests in the construction of his sandwich domain. But she could tell from this part of the scene that his results were still relatively weak. The boundary between the real and the imaginary was not clearly sorted out. It was quite sensitive to external stimuli, and its internal structure was not clear enough. It lacked stability. As the sole designer, Luo Nen didn't seem to be ready yet. In fact, Luo Nan's gaze was always focused on Rue Wen after she entered this area. He attempted to analyze her deeper nature in order to make this area better accommodate her existence. Rue Wen was very happy to cooperate, but Luo Nan's ability was truly insufficient to complete all of this in a short amount of time. Luo Nan gave up after a few adjustments. Rue Wen also took the initiative to restrain her energy and adjust her state. She made herself closer to nothingness in order to avoid bringing even greater stimulation to this area. And so, Rue Wen entered the space of the withered tree. This space completely imitated the structure of the withered tree of the real world. It was as narrow and small as the real world was. Though it was narrow and small, the structure of this space looked much more stable with the blueprint provided by Luo Zhongan. It was no different from the real world. Rue Wen found Luo Nan without expending any effort. Right now, Luo Nan was in the resting room at the lower level of the tree hole space. He sat on a circular seat, leaning against the wall with his head lowered. His breathing was long and drawn out, but an unstable situation would occasionally appear in the middle of it. His back was bent, his arms were crossed, his legs were crossed, and he was sitting very openly. However, if one looked closely, one would find that the structure of his body and the details of his movements were very unnatural. As he breathed, many parts of his body appeared stiff or distorted. In front of him, there was a pile of metal components, all of which were exoskeleton configurations. They were in a mess and were not taken care of. Bloodstains could also be seen in the messy pile of spare parts. His injuries are very serious. Rue Wen stated the facts directly. Yeah, Luo Nen gave a simple response, but he didn't raise his head. In fact, his spine was injured, and normal movements were extremely strenuous. His voice was hoarse and weak. Rue Wen didn't say anything more. She just walked forward, and her slender and slightly cold fingers lightly rested on Luo Nan's neck. She made a slight shift, and she detected many areas of swelling, collapse, and even deeper and more serious injuries. Luo Nan was immediately unable to maintain his deep state. He shouted loudly, "Stop touching. It's itchy. It hurts." Rue Wen's fingers lifted up as if she had been electrocuted. She froze there, not knowing what to do for a time. "Hiss, don't worry. I'm super sensitive right now." Luo Nan hissed as he spoke. His entire body was trembling. Right now, when he opened his mouth to speak, his entire internal organs twitched slightly. However, there were some things that needed to be explained clearly, The main thing is that the perfect body created by the lamination interference isn't that easy to bear. It was so fun to bully people just now, but now the backlash is life-threatening. I'll help you reposition it. Rue Wen didn't participate in Luo Nan and Dean Wan's academic research process, so she didn't really understand what a perfect body was. However, she discovered that there were over a dozen bone fractures on Luo Nan's body from her rough observations just now. His internal organs were also displaced and damaged. If Luo Nan was a normal person, he would already be struggling for his life in the ICU. Luckily, Luo Nan was still able to laugh. He really was laughing. Wait a moment. Let me memorize everything first. Rue Wen still didn't understand. The injuries are quite serious, but these are all the consequences of having an incomplete exoskeleton frame. Not this pile. This is what I stripped off the body of the fellow outside. Cold sweat was dripping down Luo Nan's cheeks, falling onto the gaps between the exoskeleton fittings. There was even a thin layer of dust on top of these fittings. He nodded with his chin. It should be these. Master Show used the rib bones of a ghost ox to process them. Their toughness and transformability are pretty good, but their strength is a bit lacking. Right now, all that's left is a layer of dust. I relied on this toy to forcefully push myself to the perfect body. But right now, there's only this bit left. It has absolutely no value as a reference, so I can only rely on myself. I need to memorize all of the injuries. I need to see where the problems are. Only then can I fix them. I don't want to fall into the same pit next time. Rue Wen frowned slightly, but Luo Nan gasped for breath and continued speaking. Oh, my nervous system is preserved quite well, and right now I'm quite excited. This is the best opportunity. I've prolonged this state because I need to seize the time to record all of the feedback from my intuition. I feel like everything is going to be a mess when I return to my suppressed state. You're here just in time. Help me out as an observer. We'll compare the results later. If you remember clearly, then you'll learn. But if you don't learn from your mistakes, then you'll suffer a huge loss today. Rue Wen could see that Luo Nan was indeed in a rather excited state right now. Though his injuries were serious, his mood was quite high, so much so that he was especially talkative. But the more he was like this, the fiercer the suppression effect would be, and the more severe the consequences would be. In the end, she wouldn't go against Luo Nan's intentions. She pursed her lips and stared blankly for a few seconds before nodding in agreement. Luo Nan grinned and projected a work area. Many important details had already been recorded on it. There was also a simple drawing of the human body. The words and text were combined, matching one to the other. Clearly, he had spent quite a bit of effort. Rue Wen used her unique sensing ability to understand Luo Nan's body and soul frame. Her understanding of Luo Nan's body and soul frame was not inferior to Luo Nan's. She knew Luo Nan's progress with just a glance. He could even find some deviations from his own senses, so he pointed them out one by one. Her ability to describe was quite bad, but Luo Nan was quite alert. As long as she pointed to a location, he would be able to quickly correct it without needing to say much. Oh, this nerve cluster. I didn't even notice it. The relevant area is numb. Luo Nan gave her a thumbs up. You've written the words very properly. Clearly, Luo Nan strove to construct a relaxed atmosphere. It was just a pity that Rue Wen's sharp perception could easily cut through all of his disguises. You've worked hard. How can it not be tiring to be injured? It must have been really good in front of you. What I'm saying is, Rue Wen needed to think about what to say. You've been working very hard with me here. Luo Nan didn't find her words strange. It was just that when he wanted to console her, sweat soaked into his eyes. His eyes were unbearably dry, and he cut a rather sorry figure for a time. Rue Wen immediately reached out to help him wipe it away. Her fingertips didn't touch his pupils, but a cool and refreshing feeling pervaded the air. Io, this move is called Sword Energy Eye Cleansing, right? Luo Nan continued to liven up the atmosphere. Then he explained, You've seen the structure outside. It's true that it was quite tiring to bring you in this state, but your control is excellent. It's much better than I imagined. Plus, I wanted you to come over for the sake of continuous improvement. Right now, we're in the stage of collecting data and endlessly experimenting. Speaking of which, do you understand the structure inside? A little bit. It's really troublesome. You've been injured all this time. That's not the right way to describe it. You should say that the existence of this half-baked domain is a constant burden for me. But you need to see that the benefits inside are enormous. Luo then needed to give Rue one an explanation of the current background. Have you discovered yet? Right now, the core of the domain I've set up around the dead tree is solid. Even though it's also a sandwich biscuit, it basically continues with the balance that you saw last time. I'm talking about relative balance. But the outer region is something I've set up on the spot. Let's call it virtual reality for the time being. It's basically pieced together randomly, but there's really no other way. If I don't do this, a lot of messy energy won't be able to leak out. In addition, I need to use this to deceive people. I need to deceive a lot of people. Rue would immediately thought of the outer region, the fellow who was entangled in the spider web. It's just one of them. A test subject. I won't go into the details. In short, I've already become the target of public criticism due to my not-so-smart actions this morning. Many people want to pull out my tendons and flame my skin. I definitely can't beat them head-on, so I'm using this method to trick them. Yeah, I'm trying to trick them. You're using this? Rue showed a rare display of straightforward doubt towards Luo Nan. Cough. You can't really win people's trust, right? Right now, it really doesn't look good. The logic is chaotic, the rules are incomplete, and there's even some messy interference of consciousness. Luo Nan was a bit embarrassed. Forcefully integrating them into the void world is really difficult for people. The backlash is also quite fierce. However, we still have opportunities. There are conditions. For example, the recoil is quite sufficient. You've seen your big brother's soul cloak, right? There's also the spiderweb altar. Right now, they're endlessly gathering redundant consciousness resources from the sea of consciousness for my use. They're even extracting energy from the abyss region, but it's very messy. Rue hit the nail on the head. This is just like a large-scale biological brain array in the cloud. I still haven't sorted out the core architecture on my side, and there aren't many usable computing nodes. How many people in this world understand the basic concepts of configuration? Snake Tongue, Inlu, Cat Eyes, and a few others aren't very good at it. Speaking of which, you're one of the most important computing nodes. Your little brain is quite clear. The more you understand the situation here, the less worry I'll have. Understand? Rue didn't respond. She just stared at Luo Nan, and there seemed to be specks of light flickering in and out of the depths of her dark pupils. They were like the streams within a deep gorge, occasionally sparkling with light. Chapter 879. Actually, the previous conversation between the two did not affect the progress of Luo Nan's bug catching for his injuries. They naturally entered a state of concentration similar to that of multi-core parallel processing. They coordinated and mobilized their mental resources to resolve all sorts of problems in an orderly manner. This sort of parallel processing model, simulated by the brain, originated from Dean Wan's secret technique of overall planning. Admittedly, it was an incorporeal mana-consuming skill, but for the current Luo Nan, it just so happened to be able to digest the serious excess of computing power resources. As for how Rue did it, only the devil knew. Everything had been going quite smoothly. But Luo Nan's special focus state was broken when Rue cast her gaze over at this moment. This gaze had already exceeded the scope of what Luo Nan was familiar with. Unfortunately, what existed within wasn't any complicated thoughts. Instead, it was some sort of unique method that followed Rue's own logic. Luo Nan instinctively wanted to analyze it, but he didn't know how to start. This caused the unstable state of his domain to fluctuate once more. For a time, he found it a bit hard to bear. He could only adjust himself and subconsciously talk to himself. Are you wondering why I'm using such a complicated and strenuous method? You're under a lot of pressure. Rue's words were like an arrow piercing his heart. Luo Nan grinned wryly, but he felt unexpectedly good chattering like this. Yeah, Every single one of the people I need to deal with right now have abilities no less than Jin Tong and Gong Chi. I hoodwinked them this morning, but in the end, it was just hoodwinking. Those people have their eyes fixed on the cloud world. No, it's very likely that they're looking at the deeper layers. Even if it's the cloud world, there's no room for them to toss and turn. If I'm exposed, then so be it. I might as well forcefully create one. Isn't this taking things for granted? People have to live under pressure. If I don't take this opportunity to pull my strength up by a chunk, then it will certainly be very unsightly when I return. This is a situation where there is no retreat and only advancement. Looking at it from a different perspective, your big brother has indeed found a shortcut to quickly level up. Rue once stared at him. You said before that you shouldn't think of shortcuts when doing things. Cough, cough. That's the principle of how people conduct themselves. But if a pie really falls from the sky and smashes into our mouths, we can't spit it out, right? Rue didn't ask what the pie was. She didn't open her mouth any longer. She continued to stare at Luo Nan with her extraordinarily serious and deep gaze. And it was under her observation that the truth hidden behind layers upon layers of mental and material barriers appeared one after another. Luo Nan formed a connection with the material void, the sea of consciousness, and even the polar domain of the abyss region at the same time. Regardless of the details, the connection twisted time and space and erased the elements, such as distance, to the greatest extent. As a result, the vast and complicated domains that he could reach were all deeply or shallowly connected to him. Also, because of the special structure, some sort of depression was formed, which absorbed energy and information from all directions and in all forms endlessly. For example, the torrent of information created and stimulated by the billions of domain fragments in the misty maze had no pattern to speak of. If this was a few days ago, the last time Rue came to the tree hole, Luo Nan would have been drowned in the endless stream of information. And now, the source of information had increased by quite a bit. The amount of information seemed to have grown significantly as well, but Luo Nan seemed to be a lot more relaxed when dealing with it. There was an enormous filtering net that couldn't be distinguished clearly. It wasn't just a single layer, but a complex structure that spanned vertically and horizontally. It covered the entire sea of consciousness and even deeper regions. It lay across the center of the surging torrent of information. It carried out precipitation, filtration, analysis. In the end, some rules were sorted out and transported to the most core region. The core of the filtering net was obviously Luo Nan. To be precise, it was a complex projection based on Luo Nan and related concepts. The projection seemed to be some sort of religious image from the historical knowledge that Rue had recently learned. To put it simply, it was a god. Luo Nan might not have deliberately created this sort of image, but this entire process of absorption, precipitation, and filtration was destined to accumulate into this sort of structure. Rue could trace even further upwards, but it was meaningless. She watched silently, but her line of sight had already reversed. The image cast into the depths of Rue Wen's eyes very faithfully reflected the complex pulse of the present, but it was never a pure reflection of the present. Before, the echoes flowed in the opposite direction, but now they flowed in the direction of the rippling light of the stream in the depths of her eyes. The frequency of the pulse continued to accelerate, exceeding the scope of the present in the blink of an eye. The pulse continued to accelerate and evolve until it completely lost the outline of the present, transforming into a diffuse and decaying still image. And so it came to an end. This isn't good. Rue didn't know why she was seeing such a scene, but the terrible scene at the end forced her to open her mouth and tell Luo Nan. However, her ability to express herself was truly limited. The more anxious she was to describe it, the more she didn't know where to start. Luo Nan saw her open her mouth and frown, and he could guess a few things. But he already had a vein in his mind. Now that he had advanced to this stage, it was just as he said. There was no retreat. It was impossible for his will to waver. So he just laughed. I know that you feel that the layer of virtual reality outside is crooked and twisted. The simulator has failed to update. External database detected. Do you wish to connect? Warning. If external database is connected, some functions of the simulator may be unusable. External database has been connected. The prediction function is 73% complete. Do you wish to start the simulator? The simulator has been activated. Scanning the external environment. No simulator vehicle detected. Please select 1. Thinking training mode. 2. Complete mode. The vehicle can be reassembled with the help of the simulator self-assembly and debugging wizard. Minimum requirements for reassembling the vehicle. Specialization in space-time configuration. Level 2 of the Heavenly Stairway. Chapter 880. Why was it that meat pies fell from the sky? It was fine to just look at the lowest requirements. Of course, this was just a joke. The so-called lowest requirements weren't just specialization in space-time configuration and level 4 of the Heaven Stairway. It was just like how the simulator wasn't just a simulator in the traditional sense. What is this? Rue, when asked. This was a matter of course. The interface that suddenly popped up and the information window was filled with alien characters. Anyone would be confused. Luonin had said before that he needed Rue, one, to understand more about the situation, so there was no need to hide anything. At most, he would omit a few details that would take a lot of effort to explain. You can think of it as the inheritance my parents left behind. Oh no, one of the precious treasures they left behind. Of course, it also belonged to my grandfather. Remember what I told you before? There are many traces on our planet that belong to a certain or even multiple advanced civilizations. Looking at it from the current situation, even though grandfather and mom and dad can't be considered true pioneers, they're extremely powerful discoverers and translators. They excavated many resources that originated from advanced civilizations and transformed them into resources that we can use. The treehole space we're in is like this. The mist maze that hasn't been successfully developed is like this. The virtual brain system you see right now is also like this. You can't understand the characters on it, right? There's nothing I can do about it. It's an alien language. Speaking of which, the virtual brain system is far too complex. I haven't completely understood it yet, so I won't go into details for now. Right now, all you need to know is that I just activated a new function from within. It's extremely useful for the current situation. Rue One was the best listener. She didn't utter a single word during Luo Nan's long speech. She just listened attentively and watched attentively. It was as if Luo Nan was the only person in the world. There was no need to doubt that she would miss a single shred of information. Luo Nan gestured to Rue when to shift her gaze from his face to the projection area. The virtual brain interface. The central virtual brain galaxy had a structure of millions and millions of stars. It was very complex and dazzling. The outer satellites, especially the exoskeleton system that represented personal equipment, also involved many layers of explanation. Luo Nan just skimmed over them. Luo Nan's fingertips and Rue Wen's line of sight finally fell upon another satellite, which was the outer space flying ship. A few days ago, the lonely, dark body of a starship had simply circled around the central, virtual brain galaxy in silence. No matter how hard it was stimulated, there was no response. But when Luo Nan passed the 100-year sequence general education test, as well as the additional offline test, perhaps more importantly, after Luo Nan made contact with the Sunwheel Hell in the distant deep space and experienced the baptism of its flood of information, the unreadable state of this satellite was gone forever. At this moment, although the spaceship in outer space was still dark and lifeless, a certain area in the middle of the spaceship was electrified. The light in the area was passing through some of the portholes on the spaceship, turning into fragments of different shapes and flowing out. Amidst the twinkling lights, a relatively complete functional area appeared, the reflection of it. Oh, this area appears to be mini and empty, but it is actually operating normally. Although I can't see its internal structural components too clearly, it is still extremely precise and tight as a whole. It may be illusory, but the way it operates is real. It belongs to the reality of the material world. It's a virtual physical system. Luo Nan's telepathic thoughts linked with the external neuron, driving the image on the projection to enlarge endlessly, focusing on the sole light source of the spaceship in outer space. As his cultivation continued to rise, the precision of his perception and control over this area continued to rise as well. From a visual perspective, they were like two astronauts walking in space or ghosts floating in the starry sky. They approached the spaceship in outer space ceaselessly and then seeped inside. This area within the spaceship wasn't too spacious compared to the overall structure. The environmental layout was also relatively simple. There was only a single piece of integrated equipment that occupied an area of about 10 square meters. All that was left were the corners. The integrated equipment was like a large beetle lying on the ground, with its head and tail cut off. At the relatively wide front was an arc-shaped interface. Right now, it flickered with the radiance of information. Large amounts of text and diagrams, as well as the constantly switching map and various non-optical imaging effects, made all of this exude a lifelike professional style. Perhaps at this very moment, in a certain corner of the universe, there was such a piece of equipment. It was controlled by some bizarre intelligent life form, carrying out its functions and missions. Luo Nan constantly fine-tuned the angle of the projection. He was like a photographer, deliberately creating an immersive feeling. Right now, he and Rue stood at the top of the tree-hole space. Behind them was the lens and the surrounding nebula. And in front of them was the enormous piece of equipment, even though it only existed within the mini spaceship of the virtual brain system. Luo Nan was the operator. He had already found the relevant content from the large manual of the virtual brain system. Even though it was a bit too simple, he was still brimming with confidence after studying it seriously and putting it into practice. He demonstrated it in front of Rue 1. To put it bluntly, this is a simulator. Frost River reality. No, it's closer to the burner simulator or the simulation effect of the psychic wave network. After all, you're separated by a layer. At most, you're watching a 3D movie. But in my perception, it's already quite realistic. Luo Nan erased the original image on the front interface of the device as he spoke. After a few jumps, an even simpler and clearer pure text interface appeared. There were many options and their corresponding explanations. Luo Nan translated for Rue 1. Truth be told, using the secret text of the word me, to sense it was impossible for him to be confident and elegant. He could only make do with it. This is the level selection page of the simulator. There are a total of 4 options. Each one corresponds to a different level and mode. However, they aren't in the simulator. They're in the simulator itself. Oh, first, we need to understand one thing. Even though we're looking at a simulated simulator, it's only simulating one of the simulator's forms. To be more precise, it's the lowest form. Do you understand? Rue thought for a bit. She extended her finger and tapped on the simulator interface in the virtual projection area. There was a column of text at the very top. If you choose this option, it will be a beetle. If you choose another option, it will have a different appearance. This is the principle. It's like a transformer, but it's tens of thousands of times more complicated. Luo Nan extended his hand to touch Rue Wen's finger. He tapped on the first option as well. I named this option Brain in a Jar in accordance with Earth's language habits. Chapter 881. Just listening to this name is enough. As for the effects, I just said it. There's no essential difference from the ones on Earth. It's just a mechanical instrument. It builds a limited space. In the extreme, you just need to soak a person's brain inside. It mainly targets the body and soul framework of humans or other higher intelligent life forms, especially the brain and nervous system. Through electrical signals and other stimuli, it deceives the sensory neurons and creates a fake environment for people. Of course, it suffers from many restrictions. Even if it uses digital technology to construct a virtual physical system, it will only be an imitation of the local laws of space and time. In essence, it is only an illusion that acts on the brain. Some even require the active cooperation of the participants. It's clearly impossible to use this model in actual combat. At the very least, I have no way to install a virtual helmet on the heads of extraordinaries. Luo Nin said a cold joke, but Rue Wen didn't know how to cooperate. Her expression was serious but calm. Ahem, but the advantage of this emulator is that it's a relatively good editing tool. As long as there's enough data, as long as the data is sufficient, the computing power is sufficient, and there's also the power supply. It can edit a very good setting and even a script. It can create a virtual Earth or even a universe. Theoretically, it is feasible. On a smaller scale, it can be used for ordinary games and training. On a larger scale, it can be used as a higher-level simulator to perform deep calculations and deductions. The most important thing is that if there is a script that has already been edited by someone before, it can be stored and used on the spot. Luo Nan extended a finger and soon brought up the front interface. He brought up the image of a certain planet that he had personally experienced. It was the background setting of the offline test question. This script is quite amazing. It's extremely close to reality. It belongs to the reality of that higher civilization. It can be used as a reference, but it's just a reference. It can't be used alone. The plot of the exam script is too obvious. It doesn't seem like a normal plane waiting to be excavated. Luckily, there are many choices within the downloaded offline test module. I need to synthesize them. Rue Wen knew that the reference Luo Nin spoke of was referring to the misty haze-like projection illusions outside. The elements were quite complex. It looked like Luo Nin had already begun experimenting in this area, but the results weren't clear. Luo Nin could see part of Rue Wen's thoughts. He continued to explain awkwardly. There's really nothing I can do about it. My sandwich domain was created by compressing and piecing everything together. It wasn't easy for me to achieve a balance, but that was only an approximate solution in an ideal situation. It's just like the mathematics questions you're learning now. The formulas and constants used are all limited to practice and exam conditions. They don't take into account the real parameters of the material world. Don't expect to come up with anything convincing on this basis. However, if we don't care about the authenticity of the material plane, its settings are quite sufficient. The one outside, Captain Jimmy, is currently trapped in the script. I've even mixed a lot of elements into it. Coincidentally, he's implanted a very high-level dynamo core, so he can help test it out. The prey that was trapped in the spider's web and sleeping very lightly? Rue Wen understood. She looked seriously at Luo Nan and nodded seriously. Luo Nan couldn't help but extend his hand to stroke the little girl's hair. He enjoyed the smooth sensation of her hair, and at the same time, he justified himself. The current situation is much better. I can utilize an extremely abundant amount of computing power resources. I can optimize things from before, but it's still a domain after all. I can casually optimize and reorganize it. If something goes wrong, I won't even have time to cry. That's why I need to find a simulator first. The circle outside, aside from being used to deceive people, is also used for this purpose. Oh, low-end ones won't do. Let's continue. Luo Nin didn't linger on this topic. His fingertips repositioned the front interface and slid down to the second topic. Let's call this topic Spacetime Fall for the time being, if we translate it. The materials used for this simulator are quite high-end. I still don't really understand it, and I can't translate it well. It's probably called Spacetime Silhouette. But we have a ready-made example. Do you still remember? You were sleeping at the time, but you should have heard many people talk about it. It's President Ouyang's logic world. Rue Wen nodded slightly. She really did hear people talk about it. At the time, Ouyang Chun intercepted a certain crowded commercial center area of Xia City. He drew a boundary, separated space and time, and formed a world of his own. In one fell swoop, ability users and ordinary citizens were separated, and he thwarted the terrifying actions of a crazy first ablatum of the Order of Justice. Although the enemy Ouyang Chun dealt with at the time couldn't be considered a true powerhouse, this sort of method was still one of the most astonishing and absolutely brilliant performances since the era of distortion. Let's say all streams return to the origin. President Ouyang's logic world can be said to echo with a simulator of this level. Even though the specific methods and applications are different, the core train of thought is relatively the same. It mainly targets the structure of space and time itself, through a precise grasp of the local laws of space and time. And of course, there's also the extremely powerful bidirectional interference force and interference techniques on the mental and material planes to extract a certain silhouette fragment of the entirety of space and time to construct a world that originates from reality, yet surpasses reality. Back then, Luo Nen had watched the entire process in a pure observation mode. Now that he was talking excitedly, he wanted to use the external domain environment to construct the structure of the logic world from back then. He wanted to recreate the battlefield at Frost River Reality's flagship store. As expected, it was burnt before it could take shape. This time, Luo Nen wasn't embarrassed. The degree of rigor of the logic world structure and the inconceivable details filled in under this rigor. Even though Luo Nan's experience had increased by 100, 1,000 times, he had never seen a second logic world like this. President Ouyang was able to accomplish this. Aside from his profound attainments, he relied to a considerable degree on the psychic wave network that covered Xia City. He also relied on a high-precision grasp of the network's coverage environment. It was impossible to successfully recreate the logic world based purely on impressions. Plus, although the logic world was good, it wasn't practical for Luo Nan. Consumption is one aspect. Due to this method, what is intercepted is an instantaneous fragment of the local space-time, forming a fault. The logic world itself is affected by the interference of space and time. The structure of space and the time it can be maintained are limited. I've heard Oldie mention that President Ouyang normally uses this method to conduct some relatively dangerous experiments or to conduct some short-term simulations and deductions. This is the effect of a simulator. But to be honest, using it to deceive people isn't too easy. Ruiwen nodded in approval. Luo Nan's finger slid to the third option. Dang, 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 dang. Here comes the important point. For this option, let's call it making something out of nothing for the time being. Oh no, let's call it a rule puzzle. Chapter 882. Luo Nan continued to follow the order of interpretation from before. After translating the options, he pointed out the materials used for this level of the simulator. This is easier to translate. It says that the raw materials used for processing are the space and time we reside in itself. Even though he had already experienced it once, suddenly speaking such big words gave him a very reckless feeling. Ruiwen didn't laugh. She had an appearance that made sense. Luo Nan felt that he couldn't stay calm anymore. He could only cough once to wipe away the awkwardness that had arisen once more. He also maintained his elder brother's dignity and continued to operate on the front interface. Luo Nan was different from just pointing at the first two items. He opened the third item's secondary interface. The first item was densely packed with explanatory text. There were a few complex diagrams mixed within. There were also formulas and the like. Luo Nan had already researched this before. The large sections of explanatory text here weren't very friendly to a half-baked translator like him. They also exposed his shortcomings in the area of pure theory. This wasn't something that could be made up for in a short period of time. So he quickly skipped over it and entered the more complex, continuously changing, and completely unfixed graphical interface. What you see right now and what I perceive in the system are actually two different things. Just like how the material world we see is not the same thing as true existence. I can use my mental senses in the system to capture even more dimensional structures. What appears before our eyes is just a projection of one end of the complex structure of space and time. You should understand this. Ruiwen really did understand. Her intuition regarding the structure of space and time even surpassed Luo Nan's. She was able to estimate the approximate panoramic view after looking at one end for a long time. Inside, it was a mess. Luo Nan was immersed in this chaotic scene. He was even a bit intoxicated. A three-dimensional life form possessed a pseudo-three-dimensional vision structure and an illusory spatial imagination. Only a character like Luo Nan, who possessed an extremely powerful mental sensibility, could view the structure of space and time with this material foundation. The more he could do it, the more he could feel the endless mysteries and beauty within. A direct observation of the structure of space and time. Just this sort of simulation is already a huge gain. Luo Nan's attainments in the configuration of space and time could already be applied to actual combat. He had gone through the 100-year sequence and the additional questions to verify that he had indeed reached a considerable level. However, the anatomical diagram presented in the simulator was still quite shocking. Every time he observed and sensed it, he would have a brand new experience. In comparison, the real local space and time was so vast that there was no end to it. The mist maze, on the other hand, was too broken. That was just a simulation. What kind of splendid scene would it be if the real space and time were dissected into this? Yes, in order to create this simulator, the basic requirement is to dissect the local space-time, cut the complete space-time into suitable materials, and reassemble it with a method of configuration, changing the rules and laws. In fact, once it is cut, it is the change of nature, and all kinds of changes are contained within. Luonin spoke of these things as if he were cutting a cake. However, time and space were ever-changing, and the laws were hazy. It was hard to change. It was not some plasticine that could be molded however one wanted. One had to have the awareness of competing with the vast universe. Even someone as strong as President Ouyang had to rely on the foundation of the psychic wave network, utilizing multiple conditions on the mental and material planes to realize the masterpiece of a logic world. For instance, the powerful thought process of erasing the old rules and scribbling new rules required the support of a powerful bidirectional interference force between the material and the material plane, an extremely brilliant interference technique, and a space-time configuration design ability that far exceeded the standard. No matter how enormous Luo Nan's accumulated soul strength was, no matter how much power the altar spiderweb had, it was impossible to forcefully bend the local space and time to complete a precise configuration. This was despite the fact that the simulator guide already had the basic blueprints and operating procedures. But he had indeed found a shortcut by using such a relaxed tone. He didn't need to forcefully distort, cut, or dissect the structure of space-time because he had substitute materials. He had an inexhaustible supply of them. We have the mist maze. Luo Nan's voice seemed to be refracted and reverberated within the trillions of domain fragments. These fragments are a bit finer, but they are essentially no different from the structure of space-time. I can completely use the sandwich domain to infiltrate and guide them in. Not only can I arrange and combine them at will, but the rejection is also extremely low. As long as I have patience, I can form something from nothing, from small to large. When pieced together bit by bit, I can completely form my own unique rules of space-time. He even gave an example in order to increase his persuasiveness. For instance, the 70 Format Research Institute. Wasn't my mother piecing together bits and pieces of domain fragments? Of course, she should have done some dimensionality reduction processing. The area she assembled isn't a particularly standard structure of space-time. There's a bit of a discontinuity to it. But there are many details that are worthy of in-depth research. We need to properly refer to them. Those thieves only took away the equipment, but they left the most valuable wealth in place. They can't take it away, right? Luonin didn't wait for Rue when to respond. His eyes sparkled, and he spoke faster and faster. There's also that Luo Yuan, the fellow who claims to have some secret dealings with the goddess of fate. Even though he didn't admit it, there's a 99% chance that he's in the depths of the mist maze. It's also possible that we haven't explored the edge zone yet. He monopolized a domain fragment with an enormous volume, becoming the capital for his fortune. We don't need to evaluate his luck and methods, but we can completely learn from them. Who knows how long it'll take to piece together a dimension that everyone is satisfied with. But if we have a better foundation, have a deeper understanding, and then make up for it, won't the efficiency be greatly increased? Luonin had already pondered over this idea 1,000 times in his mind. His train of thought was already extremely clear. All of this was built upon his control over the mist maze. It was precisely with the mist maze and his mother's research notes that he was able to start with the most basic configuration and experience the marvels of space-time configuration. And the deeper he grasped this technique, the stronger his control over the mist maze became. From this, an unstoppable virtuous cycle was formed. This was the precious wealth his parents had left him. It was something he would never be able to fully use in his lifetime. Luo never believed that he was some sort of genius. Most of his current accomplishments were built upon the foundation of his grandfather and his parents' generous gifts. He understood this point clearly, and at the same time, he had more reason to utilize this wealth to the extreme. Luo Nen pulled Rue when to turn around to look at the surroundings of a lens. There was a ring of fluctuating nebula that was faintly fluctuating. The flashes of the stars seemed to become exceptionally bright and clear within the glowing mist. Chapter 883. Rue when understood without Luo Nen needing to explain. As mentioned before, although the lens was the main body, the most core creation, every shining star in the surrounding nebula was a rarely seen creation of the laws of the misty labyrinth. They were all marked with relatively large structures. Picking out the cornerstone fragments from within was undoubtedly the most efficient choice. Sure enough, Luo Nen spread his arms wide and used rather exaggerated movements to gather this incorporeal glowing mist. Next, we need to explore between these stars and find a suitable home. Rue Wen let out a light yep in response. Perhaps if Luo Nen was a bit colder, Luo Nen wouldn't need to take out such exaggerated actions to tease a child. Maybe he would go from bad to worse. It was rare for Rue Wen to be a bit absent-minded. When she turned her gaze back, she saw that Luo Nen was already switching interfaces, preparing to enter the substantive program. Could she have missed something? Then, what about the fourth item? The fourth item? Oh, I forgot to mention it. Luo Nen's expression was a bit downcast. But there's nothing much to say. It's not that it's not important. It's just that we don't need it for now. I call this item the celestial landscape. You can say that I'm using Grandpa's formatting theory as a footnote. Many of the basic theories inside are related to the interaction between heaven and earth and the self format. It should have a corresponding relationship with the extraordinary domain that we're used to talking about. It's just that I didn't explain it too clearly. The corresponding simulators are all auxiliary designs, but the requirements to use them are off the charts. I haven't studied them thoroughly yet. Rue Wen let out an "oh" and didn't say anything else. Just at this time, a window of information belonging to the virtual brain system popped up on the current interface. It made a new notification, and Rue Wen saw it. There's news. It's about data loading. Oh, the progress is quite fast. The efficiency of the cloud biological brain array is exploding. The meaning of the new notification was roughly as follows. Sequence 1 data loading complete. Automatically loading sequence 2. Completed low-end network preloading. Officially loading in progress. Luo Nen knew that the so-called sequence 1 was the data related to the Sunwheel hell that had settled within the spiderweb. An enormous amount of information and noise were mixed together. Luo Nen tossed and turned for several days, but the analysis progress was still extremely slow. But Luo Nen erected a statue of a god atop the altar spiderweb, realizing the integration. Under the support of powerful computing power, the progress bar was pulled to the bottom in a dozen or so hours. As for sequence 2, Luo Nen recalled earnestly for a moment before remembering. This was from the disciple of veteran hand, Wu Li. Luo Nen had linked the question board in his hands to a certain data center in Ban City. Luo Nen had finally collected this information. The source should be a part of a large data collection project of a large power. In the modern information society, this type of database also had an explosive amount of information. It was time to make good use of it. Sequence 2 data loading complete. How many seconds? 2. Luo Nen was a bit stupefied. The difference in mass. Did it need to be that obvious? Of course, from the information provided by the system, The external neuron had already been downloaded from the data center before it was officially loaded with Sequence 2's information. It was likely that the external neuron had already copied the entire set and was only now officially loading the analysis. This avoided the limitations of the Earth-level data center hardware, and with intelligent, idle operation, it created a stunning effect. But no matter what, Luo Nan was reminded by the intuitive comparison of over 100 hours and 2 seconds. Compared to the flood of data from the Sunwheel Extreme Prison, the reserves of the Earth-level data center were on a completely different level. The Sunwheel hell was impossible to quantify, but Sequence 2's massive amount of data allowed Luo Nan to estimate an approximate value range. Using this reasoning, Luo Nan seemed to have underestimated the computing power gathered by the Alter spiderweb and the ability level of the brain array formed from it. This kind of ability really exceeded his expectations. 5 days ago, the Wraith Sign pulled the Alter's spiderweb with the help of the Daytime Nightmare. It planted a hint in the subconscious of billions of living beings across the globe that were affected, establishing a connection. Luo Nan never asked for it, nor did he expect it to do anything through this connection. He just allowed it to exist and be used. But when Luo Nan and the true god and pope of the Amaterasu order battled across space, creating a scene of a falling sun and a fortress in the clouds, Luo Nan's weight in the entire system immediately increased by tens of thousands of times. A flash of light turned into an echo. Among these billions of living beings, the telepathic responses of the hundreds of thousands of ability users who had already climbed to higher levels of the evolutionary tree had already caused considerable interference to Luo Nan. For the sake of sorting out the chaotic echoes and not affecting his own state, Luo Nan used his own perfect body as a standard to establish the image of a god. This was tantamount to establishing rules for the Alter spiderweb. Since then, Luo Nan's chaotic expression had directional feedback, and the brain array of the brain array in the cloud had set up its basic structure. There was, without a doubt, a great deal of potential to be excavated within. Luo Nan's statue of God only supported the most basic of feedback. It was just as he said to Rue 1. He didn't even understand the core structure, let alone anything else. Luo Nan was able to realize a leap in computing power. On one hand, it was abundant to the point of overflowing computing power. It was similar to an exhaustive method, forcefully piling up efficiency. On the other hand, the Alter spiderweb, led by the Wraith Sign and the external neuron planted deep within the brain, seemed to possess a basic framework for utilizing this resource. Luo Nan was at best a person who used tools. This was great. It wasn't like Luo Nan truly viewed himself as an omniscient and omnipotent god. He had domains that he was good at. Of course, he had domains that he wasn't good at. For the latter, the most practical consideration was obviously to utilize tools. The sudden increase in harvests did not disturb Luo Nan's established train of thought. Instead, it raised his expectations a step further. He had wanted to experience the large data processing capabilities of the virtual brain system. Now is the time. Luo Nan's fingertip swiped across the interface in front of him. He did not directly enter the rule jigsaw puzzle. Instead, he first clicked on the brain in a jar. Before developing a large construction project, he needed to make a solid design blueprint. After a series of operations on the secondary interface, the simulator of simulations gave feedback. Do you want to activate automatic editing mode? The simulator we're using right now is actually a virtual machine. Calculations on the pure data level are not needed. The external neuron is already hard enough. Let's begin now. Luo Nan's mouth did not stop. It was as if he was reminding Rue 1, but it was also as if he was encouraging himself. Then he clicked on the virtual button without a doubt, entering brain in a jar's automatic editing mode. The interface suddenly went black, but soon, glimmering text and information appeared section by section. Model, Inner Universe. Version number, Great Sovereign Level Basic Exploration Model 2. 7. Authorized Production Department. Heavenly Abyss Empire's 17th Equipment Department. Authorization time limit, permanent. To explore the gap. To pay for shame. To live for the past, Zhang Yong. Who was Zhang Yong? Luonin could only guess that this was a name. He should be a character of great status in this high-level civilization. It was just that his words were a bit dull. The automatic editing mode settings came one after another without waiting for Luonan to ponder further, unable to connect to the heavenly Abyss Spirit Network. A valid data source has been discovered. Do you want to automatically import external data? Luonan, who had already read through the relevant instructions, did not even think. He simply clicked confirm. Chapter 884. It was the 12th of May in Ban City. This day seemed especially long. In the eyes of relevant people, this day had been divided into many events from morning to night. Ever since the Fusang Divine Tree System covered Ban City, experts from all walks of life took turns. There is no need to mention people like the Pope and Mr. Mo. There is also a high-level extraordinary level conference. Including the observers, there are close to 100 participants, and any one of them was a big shot. Normally, these participants would be the focus of attention and analysis by various intelligence agencies. Intelligence personnel would hate to stare at their crotches and see the color and quantity of their farts. But today, the vast majority of people here were just there to cheer the crowd, but they still couldn't be underestimated. There was a huge amount of information, but it was also mixed with a huge amount of noise, forming a huge amount of data that tormented all kinds of professional intelligence analysts. Many intelligence agencies around the world were prepared to work until they died. It couldn't be helped. It was better than making a wrong judgment and causing a world war. In comparison, Deep Blue and the Apocalypse Laboratory, hidden in a certain region of the Deep Blue world, had their own intelligence analysis team. They were willing to spend money, and they had the advantage of being the first contact that others couldn't get. But they also spent the most effort on this. It had been 15 hours since Mr. Mo left the public site. The analysis team that had been temporarily assembled by the two laboratories was still working intensely. Bald Jeff gulped down his 5th cup of coffee, stepped on an electric hoverbike, and temporarily left the research lab. No one cared about his actions or whereabouts. In the face of heavy analysis and research work, even raising their heads was a burden they couldn't bear. Jeff didn't go too far. He randomly found a communications room that could communicate with Earth space-time. He didn't care if he was being monitored or not. He just turned on the transworld communication system, and soon, a 3-way communication was established. The projection showed the upper body of a person. On Jeff's left was Director Mao, who had appeared at the extraordinary conference. He was the spokesperson of Quantum Corporation in the inner world. And on his right was his biggest financial backer, Wang Yu. She was the head of a certain great clan with unfathomable influence in the political, military, and business world. She was the head of the Jade Review Association. Although Bald Jeff was the leader of the Deep Blue Laboratory and had always been arrogant, compared to these two, there was an insurmountable gap in status. There was an insurmountable gap in status between the two of them. The only thing he could do was to adopt a business-like attitude and report the latest situation. The current situation is intermittent, but there are still signals coming through. The accumulation of information was quite effective. Currently, they were trying to reconstruct the possible environment of the other side based on the feedback of the signal. They were also trying to determine the relative position. No one knows if it's real or not. At the end of the day, distinguishing between the real and the fake is the most important thing. I think that if we want to figure out where the new plane is, we should ask that Mr. Mo directly. That way, we can have a straightforward answer. As he spoke, Jeff couldn't help but mutter a lot of things. He expressed his opinion, but his words were also mixed with emotion. Neither Wang Yu nor Chairman Mao answered Jeff's complaints. Instead, they asked after digesting the relevant information. The one who asked the question was Director Mao, who was still dressed in a flowery shirt. His question was slightly more radical. Do you have a basic judgment of the intersection of time and space? I mean, Levi, what was his judgment? Ban City? North or south of the coastline? Land or sea? I didn't hear any judgment. No. Director Mao narrowed his eyes. The bloodline and the excavation mission are his treasures. He can't wait to fill them with resources. Everything is laid out in front of him. Why isn't he saying anything? Bald Jeff shrugged. I haven't seen him for 7 or 8 hours. Last time, it seemed like he was still paying attention to Xia City. I'm not too clear about the specifics. Xia City, Director Mao muttered. On the other side, Wang Yu just smiled, watching Director Mao and Jeff communicate. Director Mao relied on his understanding of Li Wei to make a judgment. Circling around Xia City all the time, is his attitude conservative, or does he have a plan? No one answered him. Director Mao wasn't here to perform a one-man show. He pulled Wang Yu along, ignoring the surveillance, and opened a cross-border communication channel. In addition to understanding the information, he also needed to have a clear attitude. So, he suddenly changed the topic. He didn't even care about the awkwardness. Speaking of having a plan, Wang Yu, you're taking your time. Are you still planning to hold the high seas auction? Wang Yu was still smiling, but her tone was very certain. Of course. There are even more people looking forward to it. Really, Mr. Mo can't figure it out. From Luonan's perspective, there might be unexpected harvests. Quite a few people think so. Luonan, it's time to mull things over. Also, Director Mao, your extraordinary conference played beautifully with the adjournment, but it stifled people quite badly. I heard that quite a few people believe that the conference will resume on the day of the auction. They can invite the parties involved to have a detailed discussion face-to-face. Perhaps they can reach an agreement on cooperation on the spot. Director Mao laughed. It's also possible that a world war will break out on the spot. That's why it's in the high seas region. No. It's too close to my vacation island. Wang Yu made small talk. This is a major event related to the new plane. Director Mao, it's unjustifiable for you to hold the idea of staying out of it. It seemed like a casual conversation, but it involved an extremely serious core. As for how serious it was, the two people participating in the conversation had different understandings. Director Mao also made small talk. He led the change of topic. Speaking of the new plane, there's also Xia City. I've reminded you. There's a matter. Oh, Wang Yu maintained her smile. A sudden inspiration would not appear so openly in this kind of conversational setting. The other party must be referring to something. Sure enough, Director Mao soon snapped his fingers. Your side recently funded a research project. I think it's called something called Comparison of Aberrant Ecology. The preliminary conclusion is quite eye-catching. Aberrant ecology? Wang Yu pondered for a moment and nodded. There's something like that. However, I'm just one of the natural sponsors. I'm a private investor. On the other hand, Quantum Corporation is the institutional sponsor. The ratio is quite impressive. I'm not sure about that. Why don't you tell me about it? Wang Yu's smile deepened. The specific content is a comparative study of the ecology of the volcanic region southwest of Spring City and the wilderness surrounding Xia City. The research itself is fine, but the most eye-catching part is that a bold conjecture was made on the basis of the research. I'm not sure if the conjecture can be verified or not, but it's very much in line with my common sense and aesthetics. It's just as the beautiful lady who gave the report said. A giant wheel, has rolled over the space-time we are in. The rear wheel is in Spring City. The front wheel, Xia City, has already heard the sound of thunder. Chapter 885. Wang Yu used poetic language to describe it, but he was calmly assessing in his heart. Someone deliberately leaked the news. Just as all the extraordinaries in the world were rubbing their hands in anticipation of a new plane, someone finally began to exert their strength in front of the stage and behind the scenes, trying to guide the direction of the matter. He could even roughly guess who it was. Related to the comparative study of aberrant ecology, it was likely a sponsor like him, paying attention to and promoting it for a long time, doing a lot of homework in advance. Therefore, only by releasing the news now could they win people's trust. Even a strong-willed person like Director Mao was in a state of doubt. At this time, Director Mao thought of another story. Spring City. Many things have happened in Spring City in the past 6 months. Even someone as reclusive as Li Wei can't stay calm. I heard someone stole a uterine fibroid, which is like stealing his elixir. Wang Yu simply answered, I've heard of it. That seems to be where Jean Buhuan perished. To be precise, it's the southwest volcanic area. It's a few hundred kilometers away, and it's just missing. A sensitive area. Director Mao stared at Wang Yu, and Wang Yu looked back at Director Mao. They were both pondering each other's thoughts. In the end, Director Mao got straight to the point. Speaking of which, Luo Yuandao's laboratory is very close to that place. That's always been their active area. It seems that young Master Wang already has a direction. As I said, this is more in line with my common sense and aesthetics. Wang Yu also put on a frank attitude. A plane that's extremely close to us will always have some contact with us for a period of time, more or less, and not just appear in everyone's greedy dreams. Director Mao clapped his hands in admiration, the hairs on his arms trembling. Now that's a solid attitude. Now that I think about it, the so-called new plane for the past 6 months wasn't just a dream. So, what does young Master Wang plan to do next? Cooperation. Cooperation that can quickly get results. Wang Yu looked like he knew everything. Director Mao, UO, and Quantum Corporation, what are your considerations? Considerations? Are you talking about those greedy shareholders or the brain-dead board of directors? After a pause, separated by a distance of several thousand kilometers, the two looked at each other and laughed. There was no other reason than that these two people, or at least the two parties involved, were both brain-dead members of Quantum Corporation's board of directors. The equity structure of a public company, such as Quantum Corporation, was far too complicated, and it had to be complicated. It was one of the largest organizations in the world, and it was distributed in the hands of thousands of large and small institutions, as well as countless private investors. Even if 88 isolated cities floating on the Earth's crust were a little strenuous to support a globalized environment, political, economic, military, and historical factors had determined that such an attitude was necessary. Of course, the result of the complicated equity structure was that the leading power of the board of directors was greatly increased. External directors with huge connections and influence, as representatives of various forces, entered the board of directors, forming a kind of loose interest group, harmonious but different, fighting but not breaking. Of course, the board of directors had also been renewed and replaced over the past few decades. In the end, those who were seriously unsociable were eliminated and a relatively stable governance structure was formed. Quantum Holdings definitely had a basic standpoint. Even if it was vague, it would always stand firmly on the side of the world's advantageous side, steadily seizing the benefits. With a successful example before them, Director Mao and Wang Yu brought up the discussion mode of Quantum Corporation's board of directors. Cooperation is the correct choice. Everyone here isn't a child protecting their food. As long as there is compromise, there will be a basis for cooperation. As long as the first step is taken, there will be a first step. Even if it's a deliberate lie, there will always be elements of truth within. But many people think highly of themselves and prefer to settle things in one step. There are also people who don't recognize the logic of adults. Having said this, Director Mao recalled a certain piece of information. There really is a child among the collaborators. And quite a few intelligence agencies believe that he has a tendency that isn't too good. Regardless of whether Wang Yu knew or not, she had to put on an interested attitude. You're talking about Luo Nan, right? What do you mean? It said that this person, Luo Nan, has a tendency of thinking that makes simple problems complicated and complex problems modular. He hopes to be able to use a kind of universal solution to solve these types of problems. This doesn't conform to the reality of doing things, and bugs will frequently appear. But we have to pay attention to one possibility. With his talent and special ability, he really can find a kind of universal solution in the vast majority of situations, even if it's only universal to him. If this is the case, then it will be quite troublesome. A capricious theorist, the kind that can distort reality. Wang Yu concluded. Then she laughed. Generally speaking, this kind of person often ends up being kicked out of the board of directors. But that also requires a period of running in and confirmation. Before that, I have to lure them in first. This is the way I like to handle things. Me too. Bald Jeff listened to these topics full of ambiguity, misdirection, and hints. He couldn't help but yawn. There was no doubt that the two people in the current conversation had deliberately mixed too much noise into their semantic information. Matters that could have been clearly explained had to be packaged into encrypted data packets, using experience and logic to guess and analyze. Their goal was to use the smallest price to pry for the greatest benefit. They were already people with wealth that could rival a country. Was there any point in doing this? Bald Jeff once again gave a thumbs up for his career choice. At this time, the latest news from the analysis room was transmitted. He raised his hand. There's a new situation over there. I'm going back. There's a change. There's one more set of data that needs to be analyzed. Preliminary judgment is that it involves the authority request of Jimmy's internal dynamo core, MD, 11 type. It's related to information retrieval. It's not a small discovery. Seeing the reaction of the two, Bald Jeff quickly understood and explained. In layman's terms, we have reason to suspect that Jimmy is in an area with a relatively complex external environment. Its built-in database is no longer able to adapt to the relevant elements of the scene. Therefore, according to the corresponding mechanism, it will automatically request information support from the Apocalypse Array. Director Mao asked with interest. In other words, by referring to the data transferred by the Apocalypse Array, we can simulate the space-time environment that Jimmy is in. First, we have to wash the data clean. He doesn't have the conditions for cross-border communication like we do. It was Yin Yonghua who amplified the feedback response of the formatting domain to the main axis, and only then was he able to barely collect it. Moreover, it's already seriously distorted. It won't be easy to strip out effective information. After a pause, Jeff pursed his lips. Moreover, the identification of authenticity is a very important prerequisite. On the other hand, the Apocalypse Lab is still full of confidence in the 7th-generation Dynamo Core. Or perhaps they think that even if it's a dream, they can still peel out the real stuff. Having said that, Bald Jeff felt that his scientific work had been carried out. He waved his hand and was about to leave. Just before he cut off the communication, he suddenly thought of something and turned to Wang Yu. Send me a copy of that comparative research on a Baron ecology paper. Chapter 886. The arrow of time pressed forward courageously. Every instant it passed through was the accumulation of endless changes. It already exceeded the limits of the imagination of ordinary people. Even with Luo Nan's current strength, he could only feel disturbances that were nearly faintly discernible and illusory. Most of the time, he had to wait for the changes to accumulate to a certain degree and compare them with the nodes in front of him. Only then would he be able to see the main veins within. Over 10 hours passed, and he did a few things. Even the external environment, whether it was the howling mist maze of the sandstorm or the tree-hole space he worked hard to manage, didn't have too obvious of a change. But for the simulator, which was purely made up of data, it already had the meaning of splitting the heavens and splitting the earth, of transforming all living things. However, Luo Nen was more or less dissatisfied as he stared at the main interface of the simulator and studied the various parameters. Greedy for perfection. This isn't easy. It must be said that the amount of information Luo Nen absorbed and precipitated from the Sunwheel absolute domain at the risk of exploding was extremely considerable. At the same time, the external neuron's large data processing ability was outstanding. With the support of these two, the senior sovereign-level basic exploration model 2, 7 Interverse simulator displayed its outstanding design performance. Ever since it activated its automatic editing mode, it had already formed dazzling results. Luo Nen was dazzled to the point where he couldn't help but sigh. Not ideal. Rui Wen's voice suddenly rang in his ear, giving Luo Nen a shock. He turned his head and saw that the little girl's expression was normal. He was just about to let out a sigh of relief when he saw that the clothes on her shoulders and waist had been torn. It was unknown how, but her jade-like skin was revealed. Fortunately, there were no wounds. What's going on? The relationship between fragment number 2 and its surroundings is a bit complicated. I was careless when I cut in. That one shouldn't be too suitable. It was rare for Rui Wen to say such a long sentence. She was mostly defending herself. Clearly, she didn't want Luo Nan to worry. Luo Nan's eyebrows furrowed. Ruewen was undoubtedly the best assistant when searching and scouting the mist maze. The little girl was able to freely enter and exit this chaotic region that didn't possess any basic space-time structure. It was thanks to her guidance that Luo Nan was able to enter. Even now, Luo Nan's understanding of the mist maze environment seemed to be inferior to Ruewen's. Therefore, the early-stage reconnaissance mission of finding the foundation stone of the virtual plane was given to Ruewen. This was much more detailed than the long-distance observation of the lens. But if the little girl was too reckless and something really happened to her, he wouldn't be able to redeem himself even if he died 10,000 times. Luo Nan thought over and over again, but he still chose a more conservative method. You could be a scout, but don't get too close. Actually, I'll have to see for myself whether or not you'll be able to enter those fragments. But I'll adjust the focal length of the lens and then attempt to land in the tree whole space as a whole. I'll have to do this sooner or later, and you'll have to help me connect it. I can still do it. Ruewen hooked her finger on the torn seam of her clothes and frowned slightly. These are all burdens. Stop. Luo Nan was afraid that Ruewen would be in a bad mood and simply tear off her clothes. Though he understood that Ruewen was in a state where her body and soul were in a chaotic state, moving around while carrying foreign objects was indeed a burden. But of course, he couldn't say that now. It shouldn't be early anymore. We've just started tonight, so don't exhaust yourself. Tomorrow, it should be the 13th already. Today is Monday, and you still have to go to school. Go back and rest first. I'll ponder over a more efficient method. We're going to build this fake plane. It's not as simple as finding a suitable large fragment and throwing the automatically compiled environmental parameters inside. It's a very complicated process. Right now, we're drawing up blueprints and finding a suitable foundation stone. All of this is just preparatory work. Aside from these 2 points, it also depends on whether or not my ability in the aspect of space-time configuration can support it. Of course, we also need to have a clear schedule. If we can't build it well, we can't fool people. If we get knocked on the door before we even finish building it, then it'll be even more awkward. At this time, we can't just bury ourselves in work. We need to understand the situation outside. We need to think things over and plan as a whole. Do you understand? Luo Nan chattered on, feeling that his eloquence had improved. Ruewen didn't speak. It looked like she was still a bit emotional, but in the end, she was a good and obedient child. She wouldn't contradict Luo Nan, and she wouldn't act on her own. Luo Nan was quite reassured about this. Okay, hurry up and go take a nap. If time is tight, I'll urge you to skip class. Make your preparations. He coaxed and persuaded Ruewen out of the mist maze in the end. Luo Nan let out a long sigh of relief. He looked at the numerous and complicated environmental projections within the simulator, and his brows unconsciously furrowed. The words he said just now weren't completely coaxing her. They were all based on facts. He really did need to properly organize his thoughts and make a choice at this time. Luo Nan retreated from the mist maze with his thought. He tore a crack in his own sandwich domain and accurately entered the lower-level main cabin of the luxurious yacht by the shore of Northern Mountain Lake. Luo Nan most likely wouldn't have been able to do this before tonight. In the highly warped environment of space and time, Luo Nan wouldn't have been able to casually jump across worlds without establishing an anchor point in advance. Perhaps he would have been flung into outer space in a flash. Therefore, whether it was when he arrived at Ban City or when he killed Gongqi, he needed to set up an anchor point in advance to ensure precision. He also needed to borrow some external force to guide him. As for the current situation, he could already see Ruewen's back. Forget it. He was still far from it. Right now, the luxurious yacht was completely covered by Luo Nan's sandwich domain. Space and time were warped, and external objects were concealed. Even a character like the Pope of 100 Conversions was unable to forcefully pry through the reality of this place, unless they wanted to fight with real swords and guns. Although the people on the yacht were in a dangerous situation, the pressure they endured was much less than it was yesterday morning. Inlu and Snake Tongue had been on standby this entire time. They stood up at the same time by chance when they saw Luo Nan stride through space. Luonin gestured to the two of them, telling them to calm down a bit. At the same time, he separated a strand of his mind to traverse a distance of over 1,000 kilometers to establish contact with a communication wristband placed in the underground base of Gear on the North Bank. Finding He Wayne to understand the situation was the correct choice. However, he was drowned in an unending stream of notifications the moment he established contact with the wristband. You have a friend request. You have a friend. You have a friend. You have several dozen. Over 100 friend requests flew over like snowflakes. With a single glance, Luonin could tell that they were all powerful people with illustrious reputations. However, no matter how great their reputations were, they were all overdone when piled together. Instead, the few notifications sandwiched in between the friend requests were quite eye-catching. According to the Special Citizen Protection Regulations, your guardian Luo Shuqing's social privileges have been raised to A+ rank. According to the Special Citizen Protection Regulations, your guardian Mo Haihong's social privileges have been raised to A+ rank. Your relative Mo Peng. Luo Nan's eyelids twitched 3 times as he looked at these notification messages. Chapter 887. Luo Nan was able to feel the impact his actions over the past 2 days brought to the world from the notifications that popped up one after another. Whether it was the inner world or the secular world, nothing was immune, especially his circle of friends and family. The shock waves stirred up from this, especially the distortions formed in his social network, would bring him quite a bit of influence for quite some time. Luo Nan pondered seriously for a few seconds. Then he discovered that he was completely clueless in thinking. It was tantamount to a waste of time, so he let this problem go for now. He connected to his communication wristband in order to find He Wayne to understand the current situation. He had not forgotten this goal. But contrary to his expectations, He Wayne did not immediately connect after he sent the communication request. Instead, the message mechanism was triggered, and He Wayne's pre-recorded voice was heard. Hello, it's not convenient for me to answer right now. Before the recording could finish playing, there was a sudden jump. It was still a recording, but it had already named Luo Nan. Mr. Luo, I am currently in a state of silent communication. If you hear this message, please contact Her Majesty Empress Wu directly. Is this treatment specially given to me? Luo Nan knew that this was an intelligent setting made from the number judgment. In fact, many groups could be arranged, but Luo Nan still felt quite comfortable in his heart. He hung up and wanted to call Her Majesty Empress Wu, but he was a bit hesitant. Truth be told, out of the Iron Triangle of Xia City, this person was the one who gave him the most pressure. He had the first impression of being taught a lesson the first time he met her. He had gradually accumulated impressions and judgments. He also had to keep a respectful distance from this mysterious and deep person. Perhaps reverence was a better way to put it. In the end, Luo Nan did not contact Her Majesty Empress Wu at the first instance. Just like how people dealt with matters, they unconsciously wanted to leave the most difficult problem until the end. Only the heavens knew what arrangements Her Majesty Empress Wu would have. It seemed that she was used to being a boss, so it was quite easy for her to arrange tasks. Before this, Luo Nan needed to deal with the matters at hand. Only now did he turn his gaze to the two ladies to the side. Lu had assumed a respectful and solemn posture, but when Luo Nan's gaze shifted over, her waist and back subconsciously tensed up a bit, and her head automatically drooped down. This posture was quite proper, but Snake Tongue, who was right next to her, was even more exaggerated. She bent her knees and knelt on the tatami. Her palms were crossed, and her forehead was pressed forward. She was humble, solemn, and solemn. For a time, even Lu found it hard to understand Snake Tongue's current state of mind. But she was able to faintly sense that Luo Nan, who was in front of her, swept his gaze over without any difference due to their kneeling and standing postures. In the eyes of this person, standing solemnly and kneeling was a must. Or perhaps the simple level of posture was far from enough to make a difference. Half a second later, Lu and Snake Tongue heard a simple arrangement. Wait a moment. Luo Nan had already opened up the virtual work area as he spoke. He took out the records of the exoskeleton frame defects that he and Rue had summarized in the tree hole space. He added a rough modification plan and organized them a bit. Following that, he gave a simple description and structural sketch of some of the reserve masks he discovered after successfully activating the invisible yarn with the lamination interference. The information and data from both sides were sealed and sent to President Wan. Luo Nan needed Dean Wan to give him a look when it came to the construction tool for the perfect body that was necessary for the lamination interference technique. Dean Wan was a true master of craft design. He had the vision and ability to turn something rotten into something magical. Luo Nan hoped that the modifications this time would allow the structure, toughness, and strength of the exoskeleton frame to have a clear upgrade. If he could increase the duration of the perfect body by a fold. No, as long as he could increase it by a third, he would have the confidence to fight a mid-level, extraordinary level battle by himself. As for the masks, they were materials for deeper research. They were also Luo Nan's advance payment. Oh, that's right. Luo Nan suddenly thought of something and turned to instruct Dean Lu. Tell Master Show that there might still need to be some adjustments made to the technology that was confirmed the night before yesterday. Tell them to control the progress and just take out 3 to 5 sets as backup. We'll have to wait for news later. Dean Lu responded and was about to find a veteran to contact, but Luo Nan raised his hand to stop her. There's one more thing. I might need to mobilize the believers of the Blood Flame Order for the next 2 days to help me do some experiments. Actually, it's similar to the practice of the dream entering technique. I need them to help me do some identification work. Yeah, it's like a closed beta game, finding bugs and the like. Inla didn't quite understand what Luo Nan was saying. Luo Nan just needed to inform him of this matter. As his personal secretary, all she needed to do was nod her head in agreement. As for her identity as the Vice Ablatum of the Blood Flame Order, it was indeed more convenient for her to help Luo Nan with some organizational work. Inla discovered a problem because she thought about it a bit more. Sir, do you need to keep your closed beta secret? The believers of the Order are intermingled with the good and the bad. There'll always be a few people like Cadman. It's fine. They won't remember. Luo Nan's gaze shifted to Snake Tongue as he spoke. He gazed at the classic structure and color combination of this beautiful kimono-clad woman's jet black hair bun and snow-white jade hairpin. You can refer to Snake Tongue's state. She probably didn't remember any details during her last experience. And that Cadman, did he say anything after he returned? Inlu came to a sudden realization. Snake Tongue's body tensed up even more because Luo Nan had intentionally or unintentionally placed her and Cadman side by side. Her forehead faintly rubbed against the back of her hand, but she still didn't say a word. Luo Nan didn't need to talk to her heart at this time. He just gave an order in passing. Snake Tongue, you need to do more of this work for the next 2 days. Experience it well and evaluate it seriously. Of course, you must remember it clearly this time and explain it clearly. Understood. Snake Tongue's voice was heavy. She enunciated each word clearly, but her tail still carried a bit of a tremor. That's about it. If there's anything else, I'll look for you guys. Luo Nan was only thinking about these things right now. He waved his hand and let Inlu and Snake Tongue make their own arrangements. He circled his train of thought and continued to hesitate. Should he give Her Majesty Empress Wu a call? Perhaps he should beat around the bush a bit? Luo Nan's thoughts spun, and he subconsciously used the Hexa ear to enter the psychic wave network. He entered his friend group, which he hadn't spoken in a while. There was a group of friends from the Xia City branch, especially Zhang Yingying, Her Majesty Empress Wu's trusted aide and informant. Well, the group was unexpectedly lively today. It seemed that a newcomer had just been introduced. It was done by Zhang Yingying. I'm borrowing your precious land to post an advertisement. May 14th, Acumen College's Great Auditorium, Conference Room 3. 2 professors, Wu Zunliang and Ding Jing, will be presenting an academic report on the interference and comparative study of suspected planar pollution sources. Experts, scholars, and people interested in the ecology of the wilderness and planar research are invited to participate and support. This is just a small token of my appreciation. Little sister, many blessings. Then a large red packet popped up on the chat interface. The picture used to decorate, it was of a red-faced baby girl wearing a peony robe. She bowed with her hands clasped in front of her. She looked charmingly naive. Luonin looked at the ostentatious advertising slogan and the red packet with the image of a big lucky baby girl. He especially saw the name that had just been added. Several elements piled up and shone upon him. He felt that his injuries from yesterday hadn't healed yet. A mouthful of old blood was stuck in his throat, and he nearly spat it out. Chapter 888. Let's not talk about the thoughts of a certain guy who was spying on us. In this small chat group, many experienced players had already honked their horns in greeting and warmly welcomed the arrival of the new beauty. Octopus that doesn't produce knockout drugs. Little girl, you're very smart. Now all you're missing is a selfie. Paper doll. The advertisement isn't official. What's the exact time? Contact information? Please give me your number. We can talk privately. Moral standard rising higher. Personal friend list is open. Please add me as a friend. The privacy protection of a newbie is a bit too much. Please give me some pointers. Occasionally, some serious people, such as Shuele, who logged in with his real name, would honestly express his opinion. The frequency of new planes has been quite high these days. Even Immortal World is involved in this. The Deep Blue World documentary is about to be screened. Cat Eyes released a promotional poster. The main color of the poster was dark blue, and it presented a silent and gloomy scene of the seabed. Crag burst. It's most likely just a PowerPoint presentation. There's no sign at all. It's good that it's affected. Zhang Yingying continued to support her colleagues. Since the newcomer is acting cute, if you have time, go and support him. If you don't have time, go and support him. As expected, it was Peony. As expected, she was deliberately acting cute. The diving Luo Nin chuckled twice. Ever since he became acquainted with Peony, his partner, he had seen her sharp, astute, confident, and even decadent appearance. But no matter what, he only felt that she was a mature and mysterious senior sister. Her beautiful skin was filled with stories, but he really couldn't match up to her adorable appearance just a moment ago. Speaking of which, he still didn't know this senior sister Tang well enough. As he sighed, Luo Nin subconsciously sent a sweating emoji to the group. In the next second, the group of a few dozen people was completely shaken. Oh my god! Zhang Yingying only had time to send out this one sentence before a series of emoticons flooded in. From the simplest ors to the most complicated emoticons, there were also emoticons that were full of worship. There is no doubt that these were all emotional responses to the great things Luo Nan had done these past 2 days. It was not easy for a friend to mock him and cut off his emotions. Luo Yunxing, please accept a bow from your little brother. What? Should we change it to Song of Clouds and Water? I think the Civ plane is more direct. Isn't it Luo Yuan Y? Suddenly, a blabbermouth pierced the most delicate part of the present situation. The screen was flooded. There was an obvious pause, and then someone sent a sweating emoji. Very quickly, the emoji became a string. Bamboo Pole, also known as Moral Standards Steadily Increasing, said, "Hey, admin, delete the chat records later. Aren't you one? Then should I delete it now? Go." The group of people joked around and managed to smooth things over. Actually, Luonin really didn't care much about it. His new nickname and his new appearance of Mr. Mo were also fine. They were originally meant for people to talk about. That kind of nonsensical state was also something that could only be supported or broken by one or two scattered pieces of so-called evidence. He took this opportunity to greet Peony. "Hello, senior sister. You're back in Xia City." Not a cute girl? Octopus couldn't tell if he was disappointed or curious. "She's a very pretty big sister." Luo Nin casually acted cute. It could be considered a solid hammer. "She's also the boss of my society." 3. It was only now that Xie Junping, who had just joined the group a few days ago, finally confirmed the identity of the newcomer. He had been going along with and learning the communication methods of his ability user seniors. "Senior Tang?" "Yes, young Master Xie." Peony had returned to her normal tone at this time. Perhaps it could be said that she was a bit too formal. Also, Professor Luo is too polite. You could just call me Peony. Sweat, you're too polite. It's not like we're at school. Plus, you've taken a leave of absence. Everyone isn't optimistic about the possibility of you resuming classes. You can't be thinking that calling me senior sister will be beneficial, right? The bad friends in the group confirmed Peony's true temperament. They immediately slapped the table and laughed wildly. Peony spoke before Luo Nan could respond. In this way, we're all people of society. Professor Luo, you're the thigh. We're all counting on you to guide us. Luo Nan was speechless for a time. Perhaps Peony was having her period today. Otherwise, how could her mood change so quickly? She put on a cute face to others, but she was full of sarcasm to them. Luo Nan was a bit embarrassed, but Peony's words received considerable support and resonance in the chat group. Dogs of wealth bark at each other. Of course, Boss Luo needs to bark a few more times right now. Can you make an appointment for a face-to-face tutorial class? Speaking of which, 2 days ago Gao Tianshi and the others played with a bug in the fortress. Boss Luo, you should take the time to overhaul it. It was hard to tell whether the words were jeering or grumbling, but Peony stood out from the crowd. She deliberately stirred up trouble. Speaking of which, Ying is righteous. She bluntly attacked Abner. Professor Luo, no, Boss Luo hasn't expressed anything yet. Yesterday's extraordinary round table conference, especially the details of the conference, had only circulated within a small circle. Most of the members of the group didn't know about it. However, the name Abner reverberated like thunder to the ears of the members of the Ability User Society. So much so that a series of dumbstruck emojis were sent over the moment they heard the name. Zhang Ying replied below, attacking a fellow that deserves to be attacked. It's none of my business. Luo Nin knew about this matter. Although the majority of the people in the virtual conference hall were extraordinaries, the number of spectators was enough to spread out the probability distribution of the alter spiderweb and daytime nightmare. What's more, there were so many people who intentionally disturbed them. He had followed pretty much the entire time, so he knew the situation inside like the back of his hand. But Luo Nin didn't know what to say for a time in this sort of communication environment. Words of thanks were certainly not enough. It would be too distant. But what should he say? Luo Nin felt a bit peculiar. His heart was a bit muddled. He was uncertain. He couldn't see clearly. He always felt a bit awkward. Luckily, Peony spoke up at this time. According to the rules, there has to be some benefits. Speaking of which, the first thing to do is to protect her. Otherwise, President Abner will crush her to death with a single finger. Of course, Luo Nin recovered with great difficulty. He subconsciously sent a message. If Abner dares to reach out, I'll break his bones. Wow, domineering. The boss is mighty. Take a screenshot as a souvenir. Zhang Ying went along with the fun and sent a starry-eyed gif. Her eyes were red, and her heart was in a mess. But she didn't say anything after that. Luo Nan's feelings became even more subtle after he said those words. What was up with this sort of it's only right and proper to talk nonsense feeling? Don't forget about the benefits. Isn't it only right and proper to give benefits to others? The opposite is a mess. This is society. Peony seemed to be sighing with emotion. Think about it. These words are said to a true God. You want to give them benefits, give them rewards, and so on. Is this a bribe or an insult? It's like a world war. This is society and its rules. Luo Nin wanted to send another message, but he didn't know what to say. The subtle feelings in his heart continued to grow, and he seemed to understand something. Was this Peony's idea, or was it her boss' idea? In the end, he didn't chat too much in the group. He found Her Majesty Empress Wu's contact information while harboring complex and subtle feelings. The call connected within a few seconds. Literature Hall. Chapter 889. Your Majesty. Luo Nin spoke of a particularly awkward title in modern society. He didn't know how to continue for a time. On the other hand, Her Majesty Empress Wu spoke softly. She sounded a bit careless, but she was straightforward and straightforward. He Wayne asked you to find me? Oh, yes. What's the matter? Luo Nin was speechless for a time. Don't you have something to arrange? Luo Nin suddenly came back to his senses after being stunned for half a second. Speaking of which, he really did have something to discuss with Her Majesty Empress Wu. At the very least, Her Majesty Empress Wu and President Ouyang had given him firm support during the extraordinary roundtable conference. He had to express his thanks. That, Luo Nan's words had just begun when he got stuck. It was all Peony's fault. She spoke in a weird tone in the chat group. He didn't know what to say. Fortunately, Her Majesty Empress Wu followed up. Is it about going to D-City tomorrow? Oh, that's right. Though it was a bit different from Luo Nan's original intentions, it was good to cut in from here. He took advantage of the situation and said, Sister Yuan mentioned that Your Majesty will go to the outer seas of Ban City to cover my departure. I haven't even thanked her yet. However, the situation has changed from before. Your Majesty doesn't need to go there anymore. What I mean is that you don't need me anymore. No, I don't mean that. Traveling with Your Majesty is naturally excellent. Perhaps it was because the first impression was too deep, but Her Majesty Empress Wu's soft and lazy voice always made Luo Nin think of the gentle and refined image of a woman with a scroll in her hand. To be more precise, she was like a female teacher, the kind that taught language or history. And this image was interwoven with the warm afternoon sunlight and the lingering sleepiness. Then, of course, there was the slight pain of the book tapping on the back of his head, as well as the resulting awkwardness and the like. Of course, all of this was just a figment of Luo Nan's imagination. Luo Nan quickly came back to his senses and revealed his own plan in full. If I go to the auction with Your Majesty, I don't need to go from the outer seas of Ban City. I can go back to Xia City. I can just go from there. It just so happens that there are some things I want to discuss with Your Majesty, President Ouyang, and Old Man Yu. Luo Nan didn't directly say Mr. M.O. and the new plane, but Her Majesty Empress Wu understood. But unexpectedly, Her Majesty Empress Wu straightforwardly refused. There's no need to make a special trip back to find someone. Your Majesty, Luo Nan was a bit confused. If you're considering everyone's position, then I can tell you that with Ouyang and Old Yu's personalities, there's no need for you to deliberately say anything. Ouyang Chen's temperament and character are somewhat similar to yours. You can be considered as an otaku with skills. When it comes to socializing, it's all the ideal routines in the books. You pay attention to not betraying others and not being betrayed by others. You have a tacit understanding and your hearts are connected. There's no need to explain too clearly. Elder Yu, on the other hand, has the mentality of a senior. When he sees an outstanding junior, he wants to give him a hand and send him on his way. As for the situation itself, it doesn't matter. Both of them are like this, so why are you still looking for them? As long as you're not too willful and self-centered, it'll be fine. Luo Nan rushed to declare his position. Naturally, I won't. But as he spoke, he subconsciously did a self-examination. He had hidden quite a few things regarding the matter of the new plane. It was fortunate that President Ouyang was still able to stand firmly by his side and support him unconditionally under these circumstances. The more Luo Nan examined himself, the more ashamed he felt. Her Majesty Empress Wu's voice continued to enter his ears. As for my side, let's not talk about anything else. There's no need for us to travel together. What if something happens at this time? You're playing tricks right under my eyes. Do you want me to pretend not to see it? Or do you want me to pretend not to see it? Luo Nan was very embarrassed. Actually, part of the reason why he wanted to return to Xia City was related to this. Now that he had been exposed, he didn't know what to say for a time. Her Majesty Empress Wu was as unhurried as before. She spoke in a clear and gentle tone, just like an afternoon class. At this time, you should be asking for your assistance. What? Are you thin-skinned? Or are you looking down on me? Luo Nan came back to his senses and hurriedly smoothed out the conversation. No, I really do need your help to guide me. It's always been like this. The signal waves of the hexo-ear faithfully restored Her Majesty Empress Wu's light laughter. The past is the past. The present is the present. I was able to guide you in the past, but now I can only give you advice. It's not that bad. For some people, it's not that bad. If I want to guide Qianju, believe it or not, I'll immediately get into a good fight. Luonin choked once more. Her Majesty Empress Wu and Peony really had the same tone. She even locked onto the true god as an example. She completely placed this matter in the context of social relations. Speaking of which, this was Her Majesty Empress Wu's usual style. She had long since said that she was an investor. She even compared Luo Nan to the target of her investment. Now she wasn't an investment, but a social transaction. It sounded quite distant. Or perhaps it was an unconventional reminder. No matter what, Luo Nan was grateful. Her Majesty Empress Wu didn't deliberately put on airs. You proposed. You requested. Let's go according to your method. There's no need to return to Xia City. Let's avoid unnecessary trouble. Let's go to the outer seas of Ban City. It's also those coordinates. We'll meet there at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Okay. Luo Nan's response was straightforward and efficient. He made a firm resolution in his heart. He would take advantage of the time they were traveling together to explain the matter of the new plane as clearly as possible. Oh, of course, he still had to eliminate sensitive elements such as the Cloud World and Sunwheel Prison. Today, he would seriously organize everything. Even if he didn't meet face-to-face with President Ouyang and the others, he would still have to provide some relevant information. The information he gave to Dean Wan was quite suitable. Of course, he also needed to find a more appropriate entry point. Luo Nan thought deeply, and his mind wandered a bit. He suddenly heard Her Majesty Empress Wu call out to him. Luo Nan. Huh. I'm very grateful. Luo Nan was just short of sending his ignorant face to Xia City. Think about 100 gathering in Qianju. Think about the many people of the past 2 days. I really am grateful just now. But be careful of schizophrenia. Luo Nan opened his mouth, but in the end, he didn't make a sound. He also felt that while they were both extraordinaries, facing the martial empress and facing the pope and a true god were two completely different situations. This could barely be called the difference between friend and foe, the difference between inside and outside. Her Majesty Empress Wu continued to speak softly. The next few days should be relatively calm. There will be a few tacit understandings due to the involvement of many parties. Even if 100 gathering in Qianju are unscrupulous characters, they won't go so far as to disturb us excessively. But no matter how calm it is, the day of the auction will reveal the dagger. You must be prepared. Luo Nan actually calmed down when it came to this topic. He responded softly, I understand. Many thanks, Your Majesty. Chapter 890. Sure enough, the following matters on the surface were as Her Majesty Empress Wu had described. She was at a level where she wouldn't be affected if she didn't deliberately observe it. However, it was unknown how many bubbles were changing and dying in the depths of this seemingly slow state. It looked like the same body of water, but with the passage of time, it was likely to be different. Under such circumstances, it was Tuesday before they knew it. Today was May 14th. It was also the day Peony had released an advertisement. 2 experts in ecology would hold an academic lecture in Acumen College's great auditorium. Luo Nan certainly wouldn't be able to support them, but he had already obtained the relevant courseware and materials from Peony last night. He hurriedly studied it twice, feeling quite emotional. However, his main focus was still placed within the hazy and shattered misty labyrinth, as well as the virtual brain system that had continuously operated for over 30 hours in the inner universe. Within the misty labyrinth, Rue Wen's search and the observation of the lens had already made some progress. As for the inner universe, this simulator relied on the external neuron structure and Luo Nan's formidable computing power to simulate it. Using the brain in a jar mode, it imported a huge amount of external data and executed an extremely complex automatic editing process. Up until now, there was still no definite outcome. This didn't mean that the automatic editing process was a mess. In fact, the results produced by the simulator at this stage were already quite impressive. Impressive to the point that it was a bit excessive. Right now, the virtual work area in front of Luo Nan reflected a dark red glowing mist. Hundreds and thousands of specks of light were scattered within. At first glance, it looked like a nebula in the depths of the universe. It was a bit similar to the scene reflected by the lens. But there was a fundamental difference between the two. The nebula scene produced by the lens was a combing and mapping of the complex and deep misty labyrinth. It embodied the result of simplifying the complex. It was just that it was embodied in an intuitive manner in the end. It was roughly equivalent to a slideshow. But this dark red nebula simulated by the inner universe didn't have any simplifications. It was a direct result of the simulated space-time structure rendered by the brain in a jar mode. The rigorous core and the complex structure had already far exceeded Luo Nan's imagination. What he had originally conceived was just a so-called plane that he had pieced together by hand. It was nothing more than that. His target of reference was the Format 70 Research Institute created by his mother and the cloud world. He could probably play around with some fancy space-time distortions between the two. It would be fine as long as it looked larger. But this dark red nebula, judging from the logic, parameters, and results of the simulation, to truly replicate it in the real world, the diameter would need to be about 10 or 20 light years. That's right, the unit of measurement is light years. Moreover, this so-called nebula was not the same concept as what was taught in textbooks. It was definitely not just a cluster of interstellar gas and dust, but the result of the interlacing, squeezing, and twisting of multiple space-time structures. Inside, there were star systems similar to the solar system, as well as space-time interfaces of other dimensions. The maze of mist collided with the space of Earth, and the broken pieces and rules interweaved to form a world of clouds. Such examples were everywhere in the dark red nebula. In the simulation results, a diameter of nearly 20 light-years showed thousands of relatively complete but completely different space-time environments. They were not only distributed by the simple structure of planets and space distance, but also interfered and segmented through the complicated multiple space-time structures, creating all kinds of astounding independent spaces. Some were stable, some were agitated, and some were chaotic areas that were changing rapidly. There were quite a few of them that even exceeded Luo Nan's perception and impression of space-time environments. He was dazzled looking at them, but they did not exceed the basic theory of space-time configuration. The more he observed and pondered in depth, the more he gained new insights and comprehensions towards the usage of space-time structures and the laws of change. Such a simulation probably already used the imported data to analyze and utilize it to the pinnacle. Then again, what kind of data and simulator framework could be used to create such a scalp-numbing, complex space-time structure? This was not a simple image. Whether it was macroscopic or partial, there was some basic logic of space-time configuration behind it. Even though the resolution of the space-time configuration of the details was far from clear due to its vastness, the basic design could already be said to have no origin, no foundation. Luo Nan was extremely doubtful. Would such a simulation have enough computing power to string together all the supercomputers on Earth? No matter how mystical the external neuron was, no matter how abundant the computing power gathered by the Alter spiderweb, it was impossible to have this kind of effect. It was to the point where he suddenly had a strange thought. Perhaps this was just a copy and decomposition of a certain real environment? Perhaps such a complex and chaotic space-time region truly existed in the depths of the boundless universe. Its information existed within the enormous information flood of the sun-wheel hell. It was also possible that the external neuron's bottomless data reserves were imported and reorganized by the inner universe. Otherwise, it would be impossible to explain how this grand, rigorous, warped, and absurd architectural blueprint was simulated. It was so realistic that it made one feel suspicious. In any case, the current simulation results and environment settings were already far too impressive. It was so impressive that Luo Nan did not know what to do with it. Clearly, it was impossible to forcefully stuff such a complex and grand environment into a space-time fragment. If he forcefully did it, he would probably be unable to create a basic outline even when the heat of the universe died. He would have to make a choice from within. How should he choose? Should he extract a fragment from the corner and use it? As mentioned before, there were thousands upon thousands of complex space-time structures here. Every piece had its origin, and each piece had its own specific reason for being formed. Even if it looked passable on the surface, it would immediately be full of flaws if one were to delve deeper into it. Well, even Luo Nan himself knew that he had sunk into a rut of pure technical thinking. It was rather hypocritical. Moreover, the most fundamental basis was the large-scale fragment that was suitable for operation. No matter how well the blueprint was drawn, it was meaningless if it could not be executed. But was there really no perfect plan? Luo Nin stared at the dark red nebula in a daze. Lu, dressed in a white-collared outfit, walked in cautiously and knelt by Luo Nan's side. Lu did not dare to make a sound and disturb Luo Nan. Instead, Luo Nan was reminded. He looked at the system time and saw that it was already 8:15. The appointed time with Her Majesty Empress Wu was about to arrive. According to the plan, he did not really have to go to D-City with Her Majesty Empress Wu, but he had to have a long talk with her during this time. He had to express his attitude and strive for her support. He could not be late no matter what. He could only temporarily separate himself from the confusion brought by the dark red nebula. He looked at Lo. What's the matter? Master Shou has already sent over 3 sets of exoskeleton frames. They are all version 2. Oh, bring them over. I still want to try them out. The so-called version 2 was the improved version that Luo Nan had proposed to the veteran before his conflict with the Amaterasu Order combined with Dean Wan's suggestion. As for the version 3 that was adjusted according to the injuries of his entire body yesterday, it involved many technical issues. It was still being mulled over by Dean Wan, but it was certainly too late this time. In other words, Luo Nan had to take the risk of being injured a second time if he pushed the perfect body. In fact, his current injuries had yet to heal. Even though he had gone to Claw Island to recharge his batteries yesterday afternoon and repaired his body with the support of the night-level basic internal colonization biochemical reactor, he would not recover that quickly. Right now, he was truly in a half-crippled state. He needed the assistance of a wheelchair. Equipping version 2 of the Ox Demon exoskeleton did not do his body any good. Lu had a rough idea of Luo Nan's current situation, but after a series of inconceivable changes, she was already used to acting according to Luo Nan's will. She had absolute confidence in him. Therefore, she only replied with a yes, stood up again, and brought in the 3 metal boxes that had already been sealed. During this time, she glanced at the corner of the living room. Over there was the angle between the sliding door of the master bedroom and the inner wall of the ship. Snake Tongue was still in her traditional attire, silently kneeling. However, her body was already leaning against the corner. She was muddle-headed, her thoughts unknown. It was quite different from her usual proper bearing. There was nothing wrong with saying that she was unconscious. Luo Nin noticed Li's line of sight and casually explained, "She's lost." Li didn't quite understand. She only knew that Snake Tongue had been ordered by Luo Nan to do internal testing for his latest design. The Blood Flame Order's followers under the Blood Soul Temple system had the same mission. However, it seemed that Luo Nan's design had yet to truly land. The later batch had yet to officially join. Looking at Snake Tongue's current state and Luo Nan's own mood, the design and internal testing work were not progressing smoothly. She heard Luo Nan sigh just as she was thinking, "The map is too big. What should we do?" "Delimit the starting area. Then we need a plot thread to connect," Inla blurted out. In fact, Luo Nan's earlier words about the internal testing of the game had given her a strong first impression. She instinctively entered into her former professional domain. Back when she was the manager of the flagship store of Frost River Reality in Xia City, she had done quite a bit of research on large-scale game operations. Luo Nan was startled for a moment before he laughed. "You really think we're playing a game? You can't just write a plot thread." Oh, the Interverse Simulator really did have a plot design function. However, Luo Nan's understanding was that it should be more similar to the offline test questions from back then. It was similar to the setting and plot of an RTS game. It would design a large background and tactical goal, then create a difficult problem for the tester and so on. He wanted the simulator to create an RPG plot. Was he really developing a game? Plus, it was an intelligent editor under the mechanism of chaos. Only the heavens knew what sort of toy would come out of it. But he still had to give it a try, right? Let's not talk about anything else. It would be enough if he could unearth a novice village from within. It would be convenient to cut into this numerous and complicated world and facilitate the initial construction. The inspiration and train of thought that had just been activated made Luo then begin to consider the relevant possibilities. He asked Deanless seriously after a while, "Are there any ready-made game scripts and the like?" Chapter 891. Over the past 2 days, the sun in the surroundings of Ban City had been rather reserved. Most of the time, the sun was hidden beneath thick clouds or mixed together with the mist on the surface of the sea. Occasionally, a speck of gray-white light would be revealed. It was lifeless and gloomy, just like a story. But no one knew if it would be like this tomorrow or the day after. The flying devil ray liked its current environment quite a bit. It swung its well-developed pectoral fins, controlling the airflow of the sea to hover steadily in midair. Inlu had fed it quite well during this time. It was plump and strong, and its streamlined body would naturally produce exquisite and detailed deformations when it stirred the airflow. From the inside to the outside, it formed a cavity with special functions. These internal and external cavities coexisted with tenacity and fragility, but they were especially rich in changes. They were constantly switching and adjusting. This wasn't an innate instinct of the devil ray. Instead, it was the result of Luo Nan referencing the weapon configuration design of the virtual brain system. Luo Nan had continuously trained it for over half a year, basically forming a nerve reflex. It made excellent presets for the construction of the infrasonic wave array structure, and it also increased the devil ray's perception and offensive changes. It must be known that this fellow possessed considerable electromagnetic abilities. If it could be utilized properly, it could be used as an exoskeleton module in certain situations. In fact, Luo Nan had given this devil ray the name Cheat. Unfortunately, Zhang Yingying and her group felt that this name was rotten to the core. And this big fellow, who was exceptionally irritable due to its mutation, wasn't as cute as Ink and Jerry. It was normally called the Devil Ray, and this name gradually faded into oblivion. Luo Nin stood in the head region of the Devil Ray, one hand supporting the side of its head. This image was probably one of the most feared, threatening forms of the world government and the military. Emotional weapon of mass destruction. Mobile infrasonic wave array. Mach 4 slaughterer. Nicknames such as these spoke of the fear and helplessness the secular world had toward the supernatural powers of the inner world. Luo Nan's age and personality made him particularly glaring amongst the group of powerful individuals. But in reality, how much better was he compared to the other in terms of essence? At this very moment, it looked like only civilian fishing boats were operating within a range of 50 nautical miles in diameter. But Luo Nan was able to sense detection equipment coming from the sky, the sea, and many other areas. They were doing their best to break through the interference of the clouds and mist to lock onto his position and pay attention to his movements. As time passed, more and more people joined in. Luo Nan didn't care. This was because this situation had been set in stone ever since he rode the flying devil ray to rise from the bottom of the sea. He had stayed in this region of the sea for a long time. In fact, this was the effect that he hoped to achieve. Mr. Mo and Luo Nan, this combination of 1 and 2, 2 and 1, needed a few more variations. Only then would there be more room for maneuver. Luo Nan feigned ignorance. He allowed the satellites, submersibles, and the like to take pictures and record from afar. Besides, most of his attention was still on the dark red nebula. The Interverse simulation of the plane was already too impressive. What he could do next was to make a choice and focus on the details of his construction. But because of the habit and hobby of a researcher, he instinctively wanted to sort out this huge area before this. At the very least, don't touch the lottery ticket blindfolded when you make your final choice. However, this was not an easy task. It's the script. Ian Lee's idea was good, but whether it was feasible would depend on the simulation results. Luo Nin had borrowed the emulator's editing and setting function with great difficulty in the previous period of time to inform his thoughts and intentions. But he was certain from this The skill tree of the Interverse was pretty much focused on the map, or perhaps it could be said that it was the battle editor. Plot settings were absolutely not its forte. This round of human-computer interaction experience was much more sluggish than the pure map simulation from before. Luonin wanted to let the AI deduce and form a highly compatible novice guide plot from shallow to deep. From the looks of it now, it was just a beautiful imagination. At this time, Luonin didn't really have much hope. He could only try to save a hopeless situation. He also used this opportunity to communicate with Her Majesty Empress Wu. After all, this wasn't the final plan. As long as he restrained his demanding mentality, he would always have some leeway to compromise. Luonin was still pondering over the matter of the plot guide when a communication message transmitted from Xia City gave him a tiny stimulation. Actually, Luonin had already locked onto the orderly fluctuation transmitted from high up in the sky a few minutes earlier. He followed it all the way until it arrived above his head. Luonin raised his head and saw a medium-sized airship penetrate the thick layer of clouds, slowly descending. It didn't stop until it completely descended. Luonin slapped the flying devil ray's fins, and his figure flew up to meet it. Soon they flew side by side. The airship noticed Luonin's actions, and the side of the airship opened an emergency door. Luonin took a step out, leaving the top of the devil ray's head. He treaded high in the air, going against the airflow that rushed out of the cabin. He walked inside like he was taking a leisurely stroll. The flying devil ray did a graceful somersault, staying far away from the airship. It dove head first into the sea, disappearing without a trace. It was also at this moment that Luonin actually faintly sensed a seemingly incorporeal killing intent. Quite a few of the observers, both near and far, seemed to be pondering over the move of clipping off the wings. The flying devil ray separated from Luonin gave them the space and courage to operate. But did they know that when the devil ray dove into the sea, it also dove into the spatial fault that Luonin had opened up? Luonin was unable to construct the logic world, but he could still play around with this little trick. There's no special effect more fake than this. The emergency door closed once more, and the imbalance of air pressure quickly ceased. The airflow was no more, but the mockery that greeted him still whizzed through the air, pulling Luonin back from his momentary daze. Luonin immediately revealed a smile. Sister Yingying, the person who appeared in front of Luonin, was none other than Zhang Yingying. She looked like she had just stopped cultivating. She wore tight pants on her legs, and her curves were clear and smooth. She wore a loose gray sleeveless vest that was drenched in sweat. Her bundled hair was still damp. You're quite hardworking. You've improved quite a bit. Luonin had been concentrating on researching lamination interference technology. He had also obtained the results of a perfect body. He had a deeper understanding of the strength and rationality of the structure of body and soul, and his insight had become sharper. Not only did he have the qualifications to evaluate Zhang Yingying this way, he also had his own plans. Unfortunately, Zhang Yingying didn't buy it. Gee, the worse the person, the sweeter the mouth. Luonin shrugged. You don't want to admit the truth, but it's best if you suppress the white rainbow. Don't be like me, having an imbalance of body and soul. That would be awkward. Hey, you don't have anything nice to say when we meet. You win. Luonin admitted defeat and took advantage of the situation to change the topic. Where's Her Majesty Empress Wu? She's waiting for you in the study. Speaking of which, Her Majesty isn't as easy to talk to as I am. Have you thought about how to curry favor with her? Zhang Yingying switched between joy and anger with ease. She reached out with a big hand and wrapped it around Luonin's shoulder. She had the appearance of a good brother, but she cried out in shock in the next second. What the hell? Chapter 892. Zhang Yingying raised her hand reflexively. Her fingertips rubbed twice, quickly dispersing the cool dampness. However, the feeling of being pressed into a layer of water remained in her memory. It was exceptionally clear. She subconsciously reached out to pinch. Luonin shrugged and flicked her hand away. I'm ashamed. I really can't split myself into two at Band City, so I used a smokescreen. Tired my ass. You're practically playing with flowers? Okay. Zhang Yingying quickly came back to her senses. She quickly completed a successful association, connecting the conjectures and hypotheses she had for the past 2 days. So it really is Luo Yuan Y. Moya's MO? Well said, well said. Hey! Zhang Yingying really couldn't hold back. She reached out to pinch Luo Nan's cheeks. She looked at this flawless face under normal lighting. She wanted to know what material it was made of and how it was pieced together. Open your mouth, blink, stick out your tongue, move your ears. Holy crap, what a godly skill. Not at all. The main reason is because Her Majesty Empress Wu taught me the condensation ring's penetrative subtlety. I just did a few configuration designs and combinations. A large portion of it was piled up by automatic calculations. Luonan twisted his fake face and spoke words of flattery with a sincere attitude. This made Zhang Yingying, Empress Wu's lackey, quite happy. You really have a sweet mouth. It can be seen that people can't be stopped when they're bad. Fine, I won't worry about you anymore. Don't make Her Majesty wait for too long. Go on, but come out and play again. How about I try using Baihong to cut you? Don't be silly. Luo Nen waved his hand and locked onto the location of Her Majesty Empress Wu's aura. He didn't need Zhang Yingying to lead the way. He went straight over. Her Majesty Empress Wu's private airship had a rather simple design. Its intelligent guidance was outstanding. Luonan didn't spend much time on the road. He soon found the study, knocked on the door, and received a reply. Come in. Her Majesty Empress Wu. Luonan pushed the door open and entered. He saw today's important target. This study was located at the side of the airship. There was a region sealed with a single piece of tempered glass. Large amounts of skylight carried the colors of a low-altitude mist as it penetrated through. But as the airship rose into the air, its brightness and color quickly slid to a brighter and more gorgeous region. Her Majesty Empress Wu was right in front of this floor-to-ceiling window. She was wrapped in a wide dress made of fine linen. Her long hair was curled up on one side of her shoulders, and her body was curled up on the recliner. She was bathed in the sunlight, and a section of her bare feet was slightly exposed. A scroll of paper was placed on her chest, and it seemed that she had just put it down. This situation and this scene could satisfy Luo Nan's most typical image of a literary woman. If he were to do a sketch, he would be able to delightedly start writing right now. Of course, if it was possible, Luo Nan wanted to depict the exquisite structure of the extraordinary power of this super expert before his eyes. This super expert had a deep and serene aura, a dangerous peak, and a strange rise upon careful examination. Analyzing the lamination interference, creating a perfect body, and a series of research had already solidified his corresponding foundation and honed his unique insight. Under these conditions, a serious analysis of an extraordinary's body and soul framework would yield different results. Unfortunately, he didn't have the chance to observe further for the time being. Her Majesty Empress would already slowly sat up, and her gaze fell on his face. Compared to the sunlight that shone in, there was a transparency and clarity that went straight to the core. Speaking of which, this was the first time he met Her Majesty Empress Wu, and she was also leaning against a glass wall. He didn't know if this was a coincidence or if she really did have a taste for this sort of environment. Quite a nice design. Her Majesty Empress Wu was the first to comment on Luo Nan. She was clearly referring to this avatar that Luo Nan had created. She tilted her neck slightly, sizing him up from head to toe with great interest. It didn't matter if she had heard the conversation between Luo Nan and Zhang Yingying, or if she possessed an even sharper insight. In short, she was indeed in the know, and Luo Nan had achieved his goal of informing her. But this was just a prelude. There were some things that he needed to explain in greater detail. A large part of the reason he came today lay in this. Luo Nan walked 2 steps into the room and bowed toward Her Majesty Empress Wu. But before he could even speak, Her Majesty Empress Wu was a step ahead of him. You don't need to say much. I took a few glances at the mail you sent to Ouyang and Olju yesterday. I have a rough understanding of the situation. That's enough for now. What she said was a description of a situation that Luo Nan had sorted out yesterday afternoon. She had carefully explained a few things, but it was still relatively brief. It was naturally for the best that Her Majesty Empress Wu didn't mind. It saved Luo Nan the trouble of speaking. Right now, all Luo Nan could do was be polite. Thank you, Your Majesty. Her Majesty Empress Wu gave a silent laugh. She revealed her bright and clean teeth. She casually placed the book to the side and propped herself up with one hand on the recliner. She continued to chat with Luo Nan from a natural and casual angle. You have the habit of hiding your head and showing your tail. I also have a penchant for mysticism. We can barely be considered kindred spirits. Rather than painstakingly pondering over what to say and what not to say, it would be better to diligently guess at each other's foundations. It doesn't matter if you guess right or wrong. It will be more interesting. In any case, the general situation is like this. You can say a word more or a word less. At this stage, my position won't change at all. Sorry. Luo Nan could faintly feel that Her Majesty Empress Wu was pointing at him. It didn't matter if he understood or not. Thinking about it a bit more was never wrong. Plus, he was grateful in any case, so he naturally displayed a frank and humble attitude. You also know that I really don't know how to handle things on my end. I can see that you want to be a skilled member of society, but this isn't something that can be achieved by studying from books, observing, and imitating. The kind of person you envision will forever be making progress amidst shame and awkwardness. Her Majesty Empress Wu seemed to have entered teacher mode, but she soon changed the topic. The problem is that it will be very difficult for you to obtain that kind of opportunity again. You're already a member of society, and you're the type that everyone revolves around. You're just like the center of the world. I don't want to do any psychological analysis, but the truth is that you are already used to this sort of way of doing things. This is the most reasonable choice. Luo Nan felt that he wouldn't go that far, at least for now. Her Majesty Empress Wu stood up right at this time. Her feet were still bare, but she walked over slowly on the smooth and clean floor. She walked until she was only half a meter away from Luo Nan. Even though she wasn't wearing shoes, she was still half a head taller than Luo Nan. She didn't seem to be that much shorter than his older sister back home. It was hard not to feel a bit of pressure. Cough. Actually, even for an ordinary person, this kind of distance would cause them to instinctively activate their defensive mechanisms, let alone two powerful extraordinaries. Even though Luo Nan was an avatar, he still needed to spend a bit of mental effort to adjust the small impact brought about by his vision and sensing effects. Luo Nan wasn't sure what he should do. In a moment of absent-mindedness, he saw the person in front of him raise her hands and reach forward. She pressed against his cheeks from both sides, and she even used a bit of force. Chapter 893. Under Luo Nanmu's stupefied gaze, Her Majesty Empress Wu's skirt sleeves slid down to her elbows, revealing jade white and smooth forearms. Her clear gaze shot straight through the narrow passageway formed by her two arms, and their gazes intersected. This action was somewhat similar to what Zhang Yingying had done earlier, but how could it be the same? Luo Nan was truly a bit stupefied, so much so that he missed half a sentence. Luckily, Her Majesty Empress Wu quickly spoke, her voice clear. This is the masterpiece of Luo Yuandao and the others. This was because the so-called formatting theory that they taught was quite outstanding. It was like the logic that this universe should have. Even if the framework was too strict and caused one's growth to be delayed, as long as one kept digging within the framework and relied on the logic of formatting theory, one could deal with many things. And until now, those idiots outside haven't given you a single question that's beyond the syllabus. Are you talking about me? Luo Nan came back to his senses in a half-awake state. He struggled out of the bewilderment of his basic emotions and instinctive reactions. He vaguely felt that he had heard similar words before, but he forgot whether or not they had come from Her Majesty Empress Wu. The point was, he had always been happy with such expressions, so he took the opportunity to catch his breath and bowed his head in thanks. Thank you for your praise, Your Majesty. Do you understand it that way? Her Majesty Empress Wu laughed involuntarily. She withdrew her hand under Luo Nan's confused expression, but she still maintained her current distance. She looked down at Luo Nan's eyes. Do you think I'm praising you? Let's just take it that way. But forgive me for being blunt. There's no future in the mental path. Luo Nan had forgotten how many times he had fallen into an awkward situation where he was unable to continue the conversation. The most direct reaction in his mind was preposterous. It must be known that the Iron Triangle of Xia City, including Her Majesty Empress Wu, were all on the mental side. A feeling of absurdity filled his chest. However, when it came to a technical discussion, even if it was more macroscopic, he still maintained his composure and found the corresponding logic. Your Majesty, do you mean that we shouldn't focus on the spiritual side, and that we need the material and spiritual sides to go hand in hand and interact with each other? What he did not say was, just like Raven. Yet here, Her Majesty Empress Wu carried out her mysticism, smiling without saying a word. Luo Nan's chest felt a bit stuffy. He could only continue his train of thought. If this was what Her Majesty Empress Wu meant, then it was quite reasonable. Though Luo Nan had always put special effort into the mental side, he had always used his mother's coupling theory to build a body and soul frame where the God gear and body gear interacted. Logically speaking, it could not be considered particularly biased. However, after killing Gong Qi, the winner-takes-all rule of the altar spiderweb was activated, seizing all of Gong Qi's soul energy. This caused his accumulation in the mental aspect to skyrocket once again, distorting the structure of space and time and basically forming a sandwich domain. This brought about a new round of imbalance between body and soul. It really did bring quite a bit of trouble to Luo Nan. If that was the case, it would make sense. Luo Nan hesitated for a few seconds. He saw that Her Majesty Empress Wu was still smiling. Her Majesty Empress Wu didn't have any explicit intentions. Luo Nan thought about how she had once refused to listen to his cultivation insights. She had even said, "My medicine is his poison." Right now, this line of thought was probably working. In this way, Luo Nan could only respond, "I will pay attention. I will ask His Majesty for guidance later." Only now did Her Majesty Empress Wu make a move. She reached out a hand and pressed it against the chest of Luo Nan's avatar. She pushed it back slightly, pulling some distance away. How about it? Now you've encountered a social partner that doesn't revolve around you. Plus, you have a request of others. The feeling is different from calling yourself an ancestor. If you really want to be a so-called social person, then you have to answer a question right now. What are you prepared to use to curry favor with me? Was this a demonstration? Or was it a hint or an explicit indication? Or was it time to cut to the main topic? Luo Nan was still a bit nervous for a time. But then, Her Majesty Empress Wu cracked a smile once more. Forget it. In this form of social interaction, you're still a newbie. There's no point in letting you guess. Speaking of which, you're one of my more outstanding investment targets in recent years. But investment is just my chosen profession. My interest in it has already begun to fade. There are only a few hobbies that haven't changed over the years. Luo Nan would be an idiot if he still didn't understand by this time. He hurriedly bowed and asked, "I'd like to hear the details." Her Majesty Empress Wu didn't beat around the bush. She bent 3 fingers in succession. First, travel. Second, archaeology. Third, treasure hunting. That's about it. Luo Nan went, and asked cautiously, "Can Your Majesty speak a bit more in detail?" Her Majesty Empress Wu finally indicated that Luo Nan, the guest who entered the room, could find a place to sit. She then returned to sit on the recliner in front of the French window. "I don't have enough courage." "Forget it. Whatever you say is what you say." Luo Nan forcefully swallowed the ridicule in his throat to maintain the continuity of her words. He looked at her leaning against the increasingly bright light of the sky and spoke unhurriedly. Traveling is like looking at flowers on horseback. It doesn't affect people. Archaeology is nothing more than tracing back to the source. It stops at academics. Excavating treasures is often a matter of life and death. So most people don't take them. In the end, it's because people aren't willing to involve themselves in too many useless matters. but they can put forth enough patience for a suitable opportunity for the sake of a goal they are interested in. Her Majesty Empress Wu's line of sight was hard to see under the environment of the light of the sun. Her explanation wasn't particularly direct, but Luo Nen had already obtained enough information to make a judgment in this situation. He muttered to himself for a few seconds before speaking. According to what you're saying, there should be a place within the Mist Labyrinth that will interest your Majesty. Due to the existence of the Format 70 Research Institute and the actions of the Horned Demon, the Mist Labyrinth itself was no longer a secret. Luo Nen had included this special location in the information he sent to Ouyang Chun and Old Yu. He just hid the existence of the Cloud World, as well as the even more sensitive and inconceivable Sunwheel Hell and a series of related elements. In the end, what Luo Nen cared about was the results of his parents' long years of research, observation, and collection. He absolutely wouldn't reveal them before he truly grasped these things. He wouldn't give people with ulterior motives an opportunity to take advantage of him. As for the overall background framework, it was taken out to deceive people. What was there to hide? He didn't mind divulging more detailed information to Her Majesty Empress Wu. It's an extremely marvelous place. Right now, I'm still continuously observing and researching it. If Your Majesty is interested, I will regularly inform you of my progress. The corner of Her Majesty Empress Wu's lips perked up. What else? Yes. If Your Majesty wishes to enter to explore, search for treasures, and so on, I can. I just want to ask you something. Do you think the Mist Labyrinth is a natural landscape, or is it a man-made landscape? It should be mixed with unknown, unnatural elements. Luo Nen answered as strictly as possible. Empress Wu nodded slightly. That's fine. Chapter 894. Her Majesty Empress Wu was quite interested in the Misty Labyrinth. It was probably because she felt that that place was very compatible with her three hobbies. She chatted with Luo Nen about many things she needed to know about traveling in special terrains. She chatted about the clues and suspicions of excavating historical ruins. She also chatted with Luo Nen about whether or not there were any hidden treasures. Frankly speaking, I've learned a lot. However, under the mysterious style of the other party, this round of dialogue and teaching had thrown out too many threads, yet they didn't consider the problem of collecting them. Luo Nan's mind was inevitably a bit muddled by the time he came out from the study. His thoughts were twisted into a rather complicated mess. He subconsciously let out a long sigh. After walking a few more steps, he came back to his senses after hearing some of Her Majesty Empress Wu's descriptions. At this moment, the discussion about the Misty Maze became secondary. However, some terms, such as stunted growth and beyond the scope, became extremely clear. Luo Nen acknowledged that Luo Nen was slow in growth and whatnot. After all, a 16-year-old fellow had just entered the voice-changing stage. He had no qualifications to object. As for the possibility that Luo Nen was hinting at mental development, he sat upright within the theoretical framework of formatting theory. He had his own pride. Why can't I do what my parents taught me? Her Majesty Empress Wu was the only one who didn't exceed the syllabus. Luo Nen felt a bit wronged. Was it really not beyond the scope? Ever since he came into contact with the inner world, more and more matters and challenges had surpassed his ability and understanding. Were it not for the external neuron and the system carried by the Wraith sign, as well as the timely flow of data from the Sunwheel Hell that propelled the several elements to form an inconceivable chemical reaction, he would have long since reached a dead end. He could only rely on the protection of the Xia City branch, just like the Red Fox. Speaking of which, everything that Luo Nen possessed right now, whether it was the dual systems of the virtual brain and the Wraith sign, or the absorption and precipitation of the flood of data from the Sunwheel Hell, formatting theory had indeed played the role of a main axis. This was the basis for Her Majesty Empress Wu's evaluation. However, the more one studied all of this, the more profound and boundless it would become. In the process, the more trouble it would cause. The two were directly related. Luo Nen was faced with a situation that was becoming more and more complicated. It was unavoidable for him to accumulate a sense of exhaustion. "Oh, Luo Yuanwei." Zhang Yingying greeted Zhang Tai in the same look as before with a towel over her neck. "How long do you want to stay in the airship in this state?" Luo Nen had a new nickname on top of his head. He finally came back to his senses and grinned. "Since I'm on the ship, I must follow her to T-City." Zhang Yingying was very surprised. T-City? If this thing followed him, where would the real body come from? This thing followed. How is the real body coming? Or should I use this thing to go? Yeah, what's that? Zhang Yingying's eyes curved into crescents. Luo Nen slapped his forehead. His vexed mood was like that of a normal person, but he used this opportunity to adjust his state of mind. He strove to put on airs. Zhang Yingying frowned. "In other words, I'll have to spend 10 hours with this thing?" Luo Nen was already numb to the terms "this toy" and "that toy," but soon he raised his eyebrows. He was no different from a real person. "We could spar a bit. We'll use this toy." "Go to hell." Zhang Yingying understood this quite clearly. Her eyeballs swiveled as she didn't mind the tide. She extended her arm and wrapped it around Luo Nan's shoulder. "Since it brought your thoughts and feelings over, it can play games. Why don't we start with 10 days? Luo Nan's heart stirred when he heard the word game. He was a bit hesitant. "I've never tried this before. Virtual reality tests the bionic nerve conduction quite a bit. I'm afraid I'll have to do some more testing." "Who asked you to play such a high-end game? Just a projection is enough." "Ah, you mean AR mode?" Luo Nan was a bit disappointed, but he soon thought back to the past. He couldn't help but laugh. Those on the Lanshan warship are fine too. Rui Wen stared at him for a moment before laughing. Then, she quickly waved her hand. "Forget it. Some people's levels have risen, and they can't afford to eat plain tea and plain food. I have a helmet here, so I'll provide the equipment. But I'll say the ugly words up front. This is a limited edition. If it gets penetrated by moisture, or if there's an electrical leak, you'll be fined 10 times for destroying it." 5 minutes later, Luo Nan sat cross-legged on the floor in the training room of the airship. He put the legendary limited edition tactical helmet on the head of the avatar and entered binding mode. He connected it to the internal sensors, debugging it with relish. In a sense, this was a high-level test of the perfect body. It was to see if the avatar's structure could conform to the deep physical and structural logic of a human body. If the avatar could deceive the relatively advanced Frost River reality system, then it would be the same as taking another step towards the ultimate reality. When that time came, the only thing lacking would be materials and nothing more. Zhang Yingying sat cross-legged on the floor. She was only 2 to 3 meters away from Luo Nan. Her hands were pressed against the floor as she leaned back. She sized up the Waterman avatar, which was more and more indistinguishable from the real one. A long time passed before she sighed. Then she turned on the AR mode of 10 days in the wilderness and started playing online combat. She won 2 rounds without any energy. She was matched with an opponent in the 3rd round when she suddenly heard Luo Nan speak. "It's done. It's done. It's done." Today, the two of them were addicted to imitating each other. Zhang Yingying rolled her eyes. "Can you use this helmet now?" The avatar's head was still buried in the helmet, but it did not really rely on its throat to speak. Its voice was still clear. "I've already passed the ability user test. It's a pity that I lack other simulation equipment. It would be perfect if I had the 6 degrees of Freedom Hero seat." "Hey, you're pushing your luck. I'm saying that this is enough. You could try a mental battle right now. The AR mode will be able to test." "Sister Yingying, can you help me out?" "Then what are you waiting for?" Zhang Yingying directly exited from the successfully matched game and re-entered. She sent Luo Nan an online invite. Come. It's not a problem to abuse you 100 times on this." "Are you sure?" Zhang Yingying cracked her knuckles. "Don't talk nonsense. Choose your opponent." "Holy crap. Kids are very vengeful." Luo Nan's face was sealed under the tactical helmet. His expression could not be seen. However, from the character interface in the AR projection area, one could see that he chose the first of the 4 major character categories: regular, deep blue, fantasy, and mutant. He chose the first category without the slightest hesitation. a military conventional weapon platform, and a combat hero. There was also a character. He chose it instantly. The Earth Army's ace firepower user who carried a robotic dog. Haya. Zhang Yingying remembered it very clearly. 9 months ago, Luo Nan and she first met on ship Lanshan. They played the game 10 days in the wilderness. He used his character to fight from start to finish. As for his battle record, hee. Needless to say, Zhang Yingying gave tit for tat. She also chose the mutant character, Feng Huang. She perfectly recreated the situation from back then. Come on, let big sister tell you. A little brother is a little brother. He's still a little brother, even when he's inflated. Chapter 895. Zhang Yingying's bold and visionary words lasted for a total of 3 rounds, a total of around 8 minutes. A muddle-headed round, an emotional round, a calm observation round. Then she decisively logged off and solemnly announced, Zhang Yingying and Luo Nan's career battle record as of May 14th, 2019 at 10:35 a.m. The former holds an overwhelming advantage. That's too much. You, an extraordinary, bullying a weak girl like me is really too much. Zhang Yingying's expression was serious. She immediately sent a screenshot of the career battle record to the group. She also sent it to social media. As expected, her wristband began to vibrate continuously in just half a minute. The notifications didn't stop. Her circle of friends and ability users were like a tsunami, worshipping her. Zhang Yingying was immensely proud of herself. She beamed with joy. Do whatever you want. Luo Nan also smiled. At the same time, his body fell backward. He wore his helmet and laid directly on the floor, making a muffled sound. His actions made the other party unhappy. Hey, what do we do if water seeps through? F***CKU. Speaking of which, thank you. Thank me for what? Perjury. Once this screenshot is sent, everyone will know that I went to T-City with you. It will be much easier for Mr. Amo to do things in Band City. Zhang Yingying was very surprised. This effect, what's going on in your head? In the end, Zhang Yingying couldn't hold it in. She burst out laughing and then extended her leg to kick him. Really? How many times does your brain spin every day? You're playing a game and you're thinking about these things. Do you have any sincerity? Perhaps it was because his avatar was lying on the floor, but Luo Nan, who shared this posture, actually had a bit of a lazy mood. No matter how Zhang Yingying rubbed her toes against him, he was too lazy to move. His response was also slow and unhurried. It should spin a lot of times. There should be a lot of people, a lot of different aspects. It's like an enormous computer room. Buzz, 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 buzz. As Luo Nan spoke, Zhang Yingying suddenly stopped talking. She didn't make any small movements. She just silently gazed at him. It was true that Luo Nan was wearing a tactical helmet, but he didn't need to use his eyes to see Zhang Yingying's emotional changes. Was this pity? What kind of image did he have in the eyes of his friends? Luo Nan felt a bit uncomfortable under such a gaze. He subconsciously changed the topic. Speaking of which, 10 Days in the Wilderness has a story mode, right? Levels that introduce the background, environment, and characters of the game. You don't have to be so petty. Even though Zhang Yingying didn't understand why Luo Nan was asking about this, she quickly adjusted her mentality. She answered seriously. Even though the demand for a standalone game to be released in 10 days has always been high, there are far too many characters inside. There's still more every year. It's very hard to take care of all of them. There still isn't a story mode right now. There should at least be a basic introduction. Then we'll have to go to the official website. Luo Nan clicked his tongue. It's not too friendly for newbies, right? Speaking of which, I let Mo Peng guide me in. I'm going to crush them right from the start. Everyone here is a type of combat training, but there is still a simple tutorial mode for newbies. Where was it? To the left of the main interface's notice board, super unassuming. Zhang Yingying guided Luo Nan step by step until they found the entrance to the novice guide. Then she saw Luo Nan dive in head first. At the same time, he opened the official website and pondered over the utterly boring novice mode over and over again. What the hell are you doing? Reference. You're crazy. Though she said this, Zhang Yingying knew that Luo Nen certainly had some serious business to do. She didn't open her mouth to disturb him any longer. Instead, she flipped through the recordings of the first 3 rounds and reviewed them. She watched Haya's amazing movement speed. Under Luo Nan's control, Haya practically didn't move an inch. He played with heavy firepower to the effect of an inescapable net. From start to finish, there were no mistakes. There were no redundancies. There were no mistakes. He arranged his brilliance very clearly. Then she picked up the memories from 9 months ago and compared them. It was as if a lifetime had passed. If she took today's recording and went to find Sophie, what would the conclusion be? Zhang Yingying pursed her lips and laughed at this meaningless guess. She raised her head again and looked at the game interface that was still presented in AR form. Luo Nen had stopped here for a long time. He tried the novice guide mission over and over again, starting a conversation with the virtual solemn drill instructor. It was as if he didn't feel bored at all. But as long as he was a normal person, how could he not be bored? The only things that could make a person endure boredom were other problems that were even more unbearable than boredom. For example, the deep pressure that Luo Nan unconsciously exposed. Zhang Yingying sighed. She stood up noiselessly and walked out of the training room. She left behind the most peaceful environment in the space. She hoped that the incorporeal pressure would slowly dissolve inside and not continue to accumulate. Luo Nan knew that Zhang Yingying had left. He was able to understand this consideration. This undoubtedly gave him a bit of support and motivation. However, a person's mental state was always fluctuating. It was hard to fathom. Not long after he began to be alone, he was attacked by an intense sleepiness. Perhaps it was just like what he had said to Zhang Yingying before. The continuous stimulation of staying in a low-noise environment with a humming sound for a long time would bring about a stronger nervous inhibition, especially after a clear fluctuation of emotions. In a certain sense, Luo Nan was still quite clear-headed. He clearly realized that he was in a state where his body and mind were at the bottom of a valley. The most appropriate thing to do in this situation was to sleep. He thought about it. It seemed that he hadn't slept for a few days. The problem was that he was pressed for time. He would reveal his cards on the night of the 16th at the earliest. There was only 60 hours until now. The new plane was just an overly exaggerated blueprint. But if he were to forcefully get excited now, the next double low tide would come. It was very likely that he would be caught up in a fatal period. He wouldn't even have the chance to adjust when that time came. 2 kind of thoughts were fighting. The eyelids of his main body, which was still above North Mountain Lake, were also fighting. In the end, it was unknown who won. A gap was torn in the middle of Luo Nan's continuous stream of consciousness. It was boundless and unknown. From Luo Nan's perspective, he just needed to close his eyes and open them again. His consciousness connected once more. He continued to input the surrounding environment's information and made an interpretation. In theory, he could roughly know how much time had passed unconsciously from the changes in the environment. At the very least, he could just look at his watch. But at this moment, some sort of marvelous dislocation appeared in the stream of information that was constantly being input and analyzed. In short, when Luo Nan opened his eyes, he didn't see the cabin of a luxurious yacht. He didn't see the game interface where his doppelgangers were docked. He didn't even see the completely enclosed space of the tactical helmet. What he saw was a serious and unfamiliar face. Chapter 896. Wartime Synchronization Rate. A doubtful thought flashed through Luo Nan's mind. The information interface of the retinal imaging opened up in his left eye's field of vision. There was a clear list of data, but the words were not words he was familiar with. After a moment of shock, Luo Nan suddenly realized that the sentences spoken by this unfamiliar, serious-faced drill instructor were not the language he normally used. He could understand these languages, words, and symbols without any hindrance. Even when he understood this state of understanding, his body and consciousness were seamlessly connected to this dynamic scene. It was as if Luo Nan was participating in a first-person perspective virtual reality game. He looked at himself in the game and replied loudly. Synchronization rate is 0. Sergeant Major, did you overtrain? The serious-faced drill instructor's expression was a bit sluggish. Then there was a moment of blurriness. Then there was a very clear frown expression. Your name is Luonen, right? If the synchronization rate was 0, you would be lying in the morgue right now. At this time, a new message popped up in his left eye's field of vision. It was the kind of mode that was like an explanation, but also like a maxim. The Tianyuan Spirit Intranet is the framework that supports supernatural powers. It is the cornerstone of the self-evolving ladder to heaven. Without the support of the Tianyuan Spirit Intranet, the material universe is more ruthless than you can imagine. It was like déjà vu in a third-rate game. While Luo Nan was complaining, he displayed the qualities of a professional soldier in the game. He continued to respond loudly, "Yes, Sergeant Major." That was what he said, but the current situation was as such. The drill instructor also discovered this. His frown deepened. Maybe you're a person with a complex environment. The recruitment office is probably so busy that their brains are fried. Then, you don't need to participate in the follow-up test. The relay station is under siege. We can't send you to the rear. Go to the confinement room for a while. That might be the safest place right now. As soon as his voice trailed off, there was a dramatic echo. Violent tremors and muffled explosions came from afar, so much so that the floor beneath their feet was visibly shaking. But at this time, Luo Nan could clearly feel the stimulation of the surrounding gazes. He glanced out of the corner of his eye. He saw a row of soldiers dressed like him lined up neatly on both sides of him. It was just that their outfits were similar. The soldiers in this row were of different sizes. The tallest exceeded 4 meters, more than twice the size of Luo Nan. Though they all possessed a relatively clear humanoid structure, their skin, bones, and even their eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and other organs were not so certain. One of them even had a thick layer of stratum corneum outside his body, like a suit of armor. He was born with a bone exoskeleton. What exactly was this? Luo Nan stepped out. Turn right. Seeing that he was about to be kicked out of the party, both in the game and the relatively transcendent consciousness of his main body were anxious. At this moment, a vague feeling of chaos attacked him. The data image in his left eye's field of vision was disturbed. It shook slightly and became blurry. When it became clear again, the numbers and symbols on it had changed. At the same time, a message box popped up. The Tianyuan Spirit Network has not been detected. Using the local database as a substitute for the simulator function's completeness data. Current completeness is 73%. This sounded like the tone of the virtual brain system. Luo Nan's consciousness was also momentarily dazed. In the next moment, he merged with his character in the game, but he still followed the established procedure. He loudly reported, 73. Current status is 73%. Sergeant Major. The words were spoken, but the feeling of chaos in this scene grew more and more serious. Luo Nan was not muddle-headed in this environment. He was clear-headed. He became more and more convinced that this scene was probably the result of the plot simulated by the Interverse Simulator. He was already able to feel the simulator operating, extracting all the available data, and integrating the relevant logic. But due to the shortcomings of its design, it was unable to meet the requirements of the plot design. It operated continuously and combined with the surrounding resources. The so-called resources were naturally the Wraith sign system, including Luo Nan himself. Perhaps Luo Nan's subconscious was the crux of the combination of the three. The three worked with each other. When Luo Nan entered a sleeping state, they realized an interactive pushing the stagnant plot simulation forward. In other words, Luo Nan was really dreaming. He was dreaming an atypical lucid dream. This was an interesting yet absurd solution. The virtual brain system and the Wraith sign system gave way to Luo Nan's self-awareness when it came to this kind of creative matter. Luo Nan subconsciously used the tools at hand to deal with this difficult problem. This solution couldn't be considered clear, but it converged into a meaningful solution amidst the chaos. Luo Nan reckoned that the current constructed plot scene was a synthesis of many factors. Aside from his own subconscious, The tens of thousands of living beings within the altar's spiderweb had contributed their memories as well. Of course, there was also the Sunwell prison. The characters he had seen so far were not of the style of Earth. Luo Nan's random changes probably had an effect on the established plot. Everyone around him and their respective characters seemed to be undergoing more or less adjustments and changes. Frankly speaking, this was a bit out of character. Plus, the virtual brain system was still working very diligently. It presented some background data in the form of information frames before Luo Nan's eyes. Luo Nan was really worried that this chaotic scene would fall apart because he was too clear-headed. Maybe I should use the dreaming technique on myself next time before I go to sleep. After some consideration, Luo Nan temporarily closed the pop-up window belonging to the virtual brain system. This helped him experience the plot and the deeper layers of the plot in a more immersive manner. As for the deeper layers of explanation, he could wait until the end of this plot before comparing them. While Luo Nan was evaluating the situation before his eyes, the drill instructor with a serious face had already found a reason to explain the current situation within the chaos. The amplitude of your synchronization rate's fluctuations in battle is far too large. It's extremely unstable. If it isn't a problem with your built-in artificial intelligence, then it means that you're an emotional person. Luo Nan stepped forward. Luo Nan and the character Luo Nan projected no longer had any reason to refuse. They could only answer and step forward. Yes, Sergeant Major, I've seen your data. You've built a decent foundation in internal cultivation and truth opening, but you haven't formed a furnace yet. Your fleshly body isn't strong enough. You aren't suited for frontal combat. Go find Officer Liang Lu. He will arrange a follow-up mission for you. Luo Nan and his game character were a bit stupefied. Luo Nan was stupefied because he heard a familiar name. Luo Nan was stupefied because of the impact of this command. In any case, a brand new mission instruction began to pop out in his left eye's field of vision. The location of Officer Liang Lu was marked on a simple map of the base. Luo Nan stared at the special identification symbol of Liang Lu. He could not help but think, did the Interverse Simulator simply borrow this name, or did it utilize a deeper layer of information? Chapter 897. Liang Lu. Luo Nan muttered this name, muddle-headedly becoming an eliminated person. He walked out of the testing grounds, giving off the feeling of a walking corpse. At this time, every soldier's standard AI automatically accepted a new mission. It controlled the combat suit and connected to the omnipresent magnetic rails within the base. This allowed Luo Nan to advance towards the target area without touching the ground. Explosions rumbled from time to time, assaulting back and forth. Some of the waves were extremely heavy, so much so that the entire passageway would sway with an earthquake-like impact. This caused Luo Nan and the surrounding soldiers to sway from side to side. Fortunately, the magnetic rails maintained their basic stability. No one was injured. It was just that within the vision of Luo Nan's left eye, the new mission provided a simplified map of the base. The surrounding routes were endlessly smeared with red, signifying malfunctions. Some were directly erased, so much so that the already planned and established routes were adjusted once. Such a change reminded Luo Nan that the game scene he was in was indeed a dangerous zone. At the same time, the scene before his eyes seemed to have already exceeded the scope of a normal dream, fantasy, and simple data splicing. There existed an internal logic that seemed to be real. Luo Nan was unable to distinguish it clearly. Questions constantly lingered in Luo Nan's mind. As he walked through the strict laws and the depths of the wartime base, the corresponding puzzlement continued to proliferate endlessly. Of course, there were also some small and exquisite doubts that were conveniently solved. This should be the relay station, no doubt about it. Luo Nan's thoughts were corroborated by the base's simplified map after the new mission was activated. The relay station that the stern-faced Sergeant Major spoke of was most likely the same as the one Luo Nan's thoughts were referring to. This was also the test location where Luo Nan needed to repair and upgrade his defensive barrier during his offline testing. Luo Nan hated that he couldn't swallow and digest the structural diagram of this base in the test location. It could be said that he had a deep memory, so he was able to recognize it very quickly. But there was still the same question: was this a borrowing of existing data, or Luo Nan really wanted to pull out the virtual brain system and orient it to the lamination interference technology section? He wanted to find the author column and compare it with the target character marked on the new mission. He wanted to see if this Liang Lu and that Liang Lu were the same person. Yes, there were many people with the same name in this world. Just speaking of Luo Nan alone, there were probably hundreds or thousands of people on Earth who shared the same name as him. If the scope was placed in the vaster civilized world, then Luo Nan wouldn't be considered to be anything special. What Luo Nan truly paid attention to was the operational logic of the Interverse simulator, as well as the nature and depth of the data it utilized. The time for Luo Nan's imagination to run wild passed by. Luo Nan's game character had already followed the established rules. He ended the short-distance movement and arrived at the location marked by the new mission. This place had a name that was very demoralizing to young people: Second Logistics Support Area. At the very least, this was the result of Luo Nan's Primal Chaos translation. But in reality, Luo Nan saw the scene with his own eyes. It was so busy and clamorous that it made one's brain boil. After checking his identity and passing through the inter-district passageway, a buzzing sound that was like a swarm of bees entered his ears. Luo Nan really did see a swarm of bees. There were countless floating individuals, including soldiers like him, and all sorts of mechanical constructs. They shuttled back and forth within the enormous complex space that clearly had divisions. They were like worker bees bustling about inside and outside a hive. This space itself was undoubtedly a beehive. There was indeed a hemispherical beehive building that was pieced together from countless hexagonal blocks in the central region. It was just a visible part of the material plane. Inside and below it, there existed various regions of the relay station, including a complex network of pipes that connected to the core. At the same time, it was a complex creation that was interlaced and stitched together by the local space-time and spatial faults. There was astonishing energy being transmitted and exchanged in all sorts of forms at every moment. Similarly, it also required an astonishing amount of personnel and machinery to carry out maintenance and adjustments. Luo Nan already knew about the former when he took the exam. As for the latter part, it was a concept that he had just formed. It was also at this time that Luo Nan's consciousness unavoidably pulled away from the game mode and the exam scene. He merged into this more personal experience. He was certain, even though this was a virtual scene, it was clearly filled with flesh and blood. Luo Nan raised his head, lowered it, and turned his head over and over again. It was too much for his eyes to take in. He also knew that there were at least 3 other similar beehive nodes within the relay station. This included a backup energy unit. Luo Nan's design of the enchantment started here when he was offline for testing. Well, speaking of the current structure, Luo Nan's mind didn't stop. He had already set up his combat suit to carry him along the preset route. He soon reached the target area and removed the maglev navigation link. This was an office area built on the outskirts of the beehive node. It was called an office area, but there were all sorts of complex equipment placed inside and outside. Some of them were still processing or printing objects with a hissing sound. Correspondingly, there were many kinds of virtual scenes erected in great numbers. Colorful rays of light interweaved together, and human figures flickered back and forth. It was so dazzling that it made one's eyes pop out. There were also clamoring shouts that were hard to hear outside. Rather than calling it an exchange of commands, it felt more like the venting of emotions. Luo Nan knew from this that the people running around inside were deeply immersed in battlefield mode. Their emotions were extremely tense. It was probably due to this empathy that Luo Nan and his game character subconsciously sucked in a breath of air. Only then did they continue walking inside. No one paid attention to this pawn with access privileges. Luo Nan walked all the way to the center of the area. He found an extremely recognizable voice amidst the rumbling noises. Hui District Node 77. You guys still have the time to debug a core component failure? Switch, switch, switch. Earth wave orbit. Did the fourth team all die there? Move towards the bottom. Don't mention robots to me. I'm using you guys to fill in the trenches. Point 22. The data package has been sent over. Expand accordingly. Don't make a single mistake. Luo Nin followed the voice and soon discovered a person in the middle of dispatching tasks. This was a 3-meter-tall giant. His skin was a bit gray. He couldn't be considered outstanding in this place, but his voice was exceptionally loud and clear. It was eye-catching. Could this be Liang Lu? Luo Nin really admired this person. He could see that the tasks this person was repeatedly dispatching were only an extremely small portion of the tasks at hand. The majority of the tasks had long since been handled through his fingers and even his thoughts. If this was all there was to it, then artificial intelligence could do it as well. It might even be more efficient. But from the current situation, this person wasn't just distributing tasks. More importantly, he was giving technical guidance to the maintenance personnel on the front lines. Even though there were a few superfluous words and idle chatter within the emotional clamor, every sentence was straightforward and efficient. The direction was clear. It made people feel that if they did as he said, they wouldn't go wrong. Looking at the feedback, this was indeed the case. In this way, what level of parallel processing did the brain have to reach? What level of technical expertise did one have to reach in order to have this kind of ability? Luo Nin noticed this person, and this person also noticed him. This person's bloodshot eyes stared over. You're standing here. Are you preparing to take a funeral photo? Luo Nin's game character stood at attention. I am Liang Lu. This is your soldier. Take him away. Huh? Luo Nin's mind flickered, and a tall and skinny person scuttled out from the side. He was approximately 190 centimeters tall, and he wore some sort of goggle-like observation device. Only half of his face was exposed. His skin was quite white, but his lips were pursed. He had an extremely capable and serious appearance. Yes, field officer. Newbie, follow me. Unfortunately, he stuttered, and the remaining half of his white face turned red in an instant. Luo Nin. Chapter 898. In any case, Luo Nin had already found Officer Liang Lu, the target of the mission. It seemed that Liang Lu wasn't too difficult to get along with. Actually, Luo Nin didn't really understand why the sergeant major had sent him here before. But the officer who gave the orders seemed to be of a higher rank and had already made arrangements. Luo Nin was happy to continue following the plot. He wanted to see what sort of arrangements the Interverse editor or his own subconscious would make. Luo Nin glanced at the proficient officer once more. He obtained the officer's name from the auxiliary AI, Shengzhan. This name was quite odd, but he really was a capable character. Newbie, keep up. If you don't want to take the long way around, we need to hurry. The AI received a message broadcast just in time with Liang Lu's reminder. The interruption station has entered level 1 war mode. The power supply to non-essential areas will be cut off. The soldier's corridor will be shut down in 30 breaths. The auxiliary magnetic rails will be shut down in 120 breaths. Luo Nin knew that the breath was the basic unit of time in this interstellar civilization. It was roughly 5 times the Earth's standard second. 30 breaths was around 2.5 minutes. Liang Lu said, "The officer has already made arrangements. We'll be returning to the 2 Hives room to conduct your induction training there. If we can enter Tunnel 3 within 10 breaths, we can save around 70 breaths. We'll even have a bit more time to familiarize ourselves with the business." Luo Nin's game character gave a proper salute. Yes, Officer Liang Lu. Liang Lu was quite satisfied with Luo Nin's response, but he didn't maintain his arrogance towards the end. The corner of his lips perked up. There's no need to address me so formally. I'm not an officer or a noble. I'm just a rank 2 officer right now. I've only been in the military for 50 weeks. He took off the goggles on his face as he spoke, revealing a delicate and pretty but ordinary face and a pair of pure black pupils. There was practically no difference between him and a normal Earthling. Luo Nin still didn't know whether this was the result of the data splicing or if Liang Lu was like this in the first place. He didn't waste his time thinking about this. Instead, he researched and converted the two different time units. The extraterrestrial civilization he currently resided in used a concise decimal system for time units. Apart from the basic breath, which it didn't know the basis of the minute, hour, day, week, quarter, year, and other scales were all in decimal scale. Of course, Luo didn't have the leisure to care about those proper nouns. These units were the result of crude translation. Some didn't actually have that meaning. They were just forcefully corresponded for the sake of neatness. This decimal system caused the time represented by each level of units to vary in length when compared to Earth units. The 50 weeks that Liang Lu mentioned was about 9 to 10 months in Earth's time. Indeed, he was still a newbie. It was no wonder that he still looked like a student. It seemed like he hadn't been trained enough in the military. Luo Nan gave his evaluation here, and his game character maintained a respectful attitude. He followed along, quickly merging into the spacious and empty space outside the hive. After a few turns, he entered a certain tunnel. The moment they entered, there was a slight sense of spatial dislocation. Half a second later, they came to a big tube with a diameter of more than 100 meters. According to the authority, they were assigned to a specific invisible magnetic track and were rushing forward at a speed of almost 100 kilometers per hour. In front of him and behind him, the people whizzing past from their respective tracks were all people like them. At first glance, it seemed chaotic, but in fact, non-armed personnel, armed soldiers, and those who were carrying heavy equipment were all separated into different categories in an orderly manner. Moreover, some of them suddenly teleported out halfway and disappeared without a trace. Clearly, they had some kind of spatial teleportation effect. Luo Nin knew that this was the most convenient channel to connect the relay station's local space-time with the underground core's half-plane. With the current level of technology on Earth, such a design that could distort the normal structure of space could not even touch the edge of it. Back when he was offline, he had reconstructed the defense array in order to take care of the spatial relationship between the two of them. It had given him a huge headache. In any case, Liang Lu's calculations were reliable. They arrived at the inner area of the two hive before the fast tunnel closed. This place was already a relatively independent demiplane. Compared to the base outside, that was being attacked by powerful enemies, the demiplane was much more peaceful, and there were no frequent explosions. It was just that the level of bustle and noise here was not inferior to the command room, just now, but also somewhat different. At this very moment, Luo Nan's eyes and ears were filled with various colors of paint and the sound of metal striking against metal. Within the complex and accessible space, there were self-propelled types, absorption types, and levitating types. There were also various mechanical creations that twisted and turned on conveyor belts. They continued to shuttle and push forward, converging into a majestic flood of steel. They were endlessly transported in from the outside, but it was unknown where they were going. "This is our combat mission." Liang Lu raised his chin. "We need to get these fellows to operate again. Most of them seem to have no problems." Luo Nan relied on his own judgment. Liang Lu sneered. "They don't have any problems by themselves, but thanks to a certain arrogant fellow, all of them have problems." Luo Nan blinked his eyes. "Let's not talk about the problems first." According to Liang Lu's words, could it be that they had to repair all of these tens of thousands of machines? "Don't be nervous. First of all, you're just a newbie. You're just here to help. Second, there are many newbies like you. Third, these days won't be long. You won't need to add to the chaos when the reinforcements arrive. Lastly, believe in Colonel Sheng and my arrangements. They will absolutely take care of your current level." Liang Lu's words made the newbie Luo Nan feel a certain power of retribution. Liang Lu felt that Luo Nan's words were quite amiable. He continued with this tone and encouraged Luo Nan. "I just looked at your data. You are one of the first batch of naturalized seed talents to pass the 100-year sequence after Calamity Era. Even though there was a gap of several thousand years before you, and no one had much experience, everyone continued to follow the standards of Zhani's era. It's true that your grades are severely biased, but you still have quite the standard in the field of configuration. Of course, you're biased to the point that it's like you've skipped an exam. You can only display your abilities to the fullest extent in a technical post like us. Luo Nen heard many specialized words in a row. Things like Calamity Era, 100-year sequence, Naturalized Seed, Zhanhe Era. There were some he was familiar with, but there were also some he was completely unfamiliar with. The unclear meaning of these words continuously severed Liang Lu's explanation, making it hard for Luo Nan to understand. This was the disadvantage of an immersive experience. Luo Nan nearly reopened the virtual brain system's information window to see if there would be a proper explanation inside. And at this time, the area where the two were located lit up with red light. Liang Lu, who had been speaking with confidence and composure, shut his mouth a bit earlier. He frowned as he received the external information. Chapter 899. Luo Nan's eyes widened as he observed. He was thinking to himself whether or not the simulator had begun a certain storyline. But Liang Lu didn't say anything until the end of the communication. He just made a few settings on a metal wall beside him, and the flashing red light in the surrounding area quieted down. Officer Liang Lu, I told you not to be too formal. You can call me Officer or Liang Lu. Liang Lu revealed a smile once more, but his brows weren't as bright as before. Luo Nen asked him, Is there a mission? Lieutenant Officer Xiao has also been hit. He's next door. This time the internal maintenance of the hive will be troublesome. Luckily, it's not the front lines. Hit. This isn't something we can handle. But don't worry. Lieutenant Officer Sheng will be back soon. Liang Lu responded, but soon his face turned serious again. Relax. You need to concentrate. The military isn't a place to satisfy curiosity. Time is tight right now, and opportunities are hard to come by. You can't just casually fool around. Yes, officer. Luo Nan's game character had a proper attitude. Liang Lu was very satisfied with this. He continued to introduce their future working environment. Don't look at how few living people can be seen here. This is the operating axis and data center of the entire relay station. From the basic construction, pipeline paving, energy conversion, surrounding terrain, and even space-time structure. There are also the designs of various modules, vehicles, and armor. All the basic information is here. With this, you can theoretically build a relay station from scratch and make it operate independently. It can be said that with the land in hand, I have the base. Was the plot arrangement of the simulator this rough? Luo Nan suspected that the simulator of the Interverse was making some sort of secret peace with his subconscious. That was why the simulator was able to lean the game plot in this direction. Of course, Luo Nan wouldn't refuse this. It was true that he had seen a portion of the blueprints during offline testing, but it would naturally be better if he had the chance to review and compare. Liang Lu raised his eyebrows when he saw Luo Nan in a daze. Do you feel that the quantity is too large and that it's hard to do? It's actually very simple. For someone like you, who has a foundation in configuration design, you just need to familiarize yourself with the blueprints and practice. Your level will rise very quickly. Once you're familiar with it, you can assist Lieutenant Officer Sheng. Of course, it's just running errands for now. Everyone has to pass this hurdle. Yes, Luo Nan's game character was still the template of an outstanding soldier. He answered in a straightforward and efficient manner. Liang Lu, on the other hand, found it hard to stop the moment he opened his mouth. Yes, the current situation is a bit more serious than usual. As you can see, we're being attacked by the servant army outside. The damage rate of all kinds of equipment is very high, and the pressure is great. At the same time, we have to eliminate the negative effects of a certain arrogant fellow as soon as possible. You have to be prepared to shed a layer of skin. Luo Nan had already heard Liang Lu mention a certain conceited fellow twice. It was hard not to be curious. He forgot that he had just been warned and subconsciously asked, "Who is that?" It was obvious that Liang Lu was just putting on a show earlier, but he had forgotten all about it right now. Overwhelmed by his emotions, he put on an obvious muscle movement and said, "The guy who came to help repair the defense arrays without bothering about compatibility at all and left a pile of SH*T behind." Why does it sound so familiar? Liang Lu soon shook his head. This problem isn't something you can touch right now. Trouble can't be solved just by talking about it. Right now, we're going to do the preliminary work. Speaking of which, you haven't implanted a dynamo core before, right? Huh. Liang Lu answered his own question. Probably not. You're so young. But we're going to do a similar operation in a bit. Relax. It's a temporary external model. Liang Lu walked forward as he spoke, and Luo Nan followed behind him. But his train of thought was a bit disjointed. Wasn't it good to implant a dynamo core? Luo Nan felt that there was a lot of information involved, even though it was clearly a normal conversation. He could only do his best to digest it. And at this time, he heard Liang Lu's drawn-out voice. War makes everyone pay a price, but the Empire won't easily ruin the future of the young, even if this era isn't friendly to us. Luo Nan couldn't see Liang Lu's face right now, but he could feel Liang Lu's suddenly depressed mood. He didn't know how to respond for a time. Liang Lu's voice continued. A psychic talent. It's a pity that you didn't live in the Zhana era, right? I often think this way as well. In this era, the Heaven Abyss spirit network of the Hongguang galaxy is practically warped and polluted to the point of extinction. It's completely supported by the Jade Crystal Array. If you leave its coverage, you'll choke to death with a mouthful of poison. But the outside isn't much better. The cloaks of the gods crisscrossed and covered me. I don't even have the space to breathe. The only way is to crawl under their feet like a dog. Rather than that, I'd rather take poison every day. Luo Nan still didn't know how to respond. He couldn't help but think of Her Majesty Empress Wu's judgment at this time. He combined the two together, and his mind became a bit suspicious. It was unknown how many times these thoughts came to mind, but they struck his nerves once more. Was everything that happened before his eyes what he thought about during the day, what he dreamed of at night, or was it reality in a certain sense? Luo Nan unconsciously chewed on those words. The psychic side has no future. Why are you so dejected? Some words can just be ridiculed a few times. How can you take them seriously? Liang Lu slapped Luo Nan's shoulder. He deliberately put on a show. Colonel Sheng is also on the psychic side, but he's still a first-rate teacher. He's a master in both configuration and deployment. His Highness praises him. If it weren't for war, you wouldn't be able to work under him just by passing the general education exam. You'd have to be a specialized cultivator at the very least. What's more, the Heavenly Stairway students taught by him can form a platoon. Liang Lu rambled on about how much he admired Colonel Sheng. Then he brought Luo Nan to the so-called Dynamo Core debugging and installation department. This place was pieced together from the basic worker bee grid. According to Liang Lu's introduction, the worker bee grid was the most important basic structure of the hive nodes. It was a relatively independent module that could be pieced together at will. There were over 44,000 of them, and the vast majority of them operated automatically under the control of the core intelligence. Even in wartime, they only needed 100 people to maintain them. However, because of the godly operation of that self-righteous fellow, the operating pressure of the second hive node, as well as the other two hive nodes, had increased dramatically. The logistics department had already filled in all of its manpower, but it still couldn't make ends meet. Therefore, recruits like Luo Nan, who weren't suited for the front lines and had relevant knowledge reserves, were first assigned to this department. Currently, the Dynamo Core debugging and installation department was assembled from less than 10 worker bee grids. The area it occupied wasn't large, indicating that business was bleak. Luo Nan was the only customer that could be seen. Under Liang Lu's guidance, Luo Nan's head was facing downwards. He was in a special operating position, exposing the weak back of his head. Even though Luo Nan was in the game, it was hard for him to avoid awkwardness. He was simply like a criminal who was about to be beheaded. Chapter 900. Liang Lu was very familiar with matters related to the debugging and installation of the Dynamo Core. He gave Luo Nan a suggestion as he adjusted the machine and instruments. You must open your eyes wide. Of course, I'm not asking you to stare at me. Right now, you need to connect the auxiliary AI with the scanner. I will grant you the relevant privileges. Right now, you need to concentrate and remember the results of the scan of your body functions. The peripherals of the Dynamo Core are replaced quite frequently, but the state of a person's body functions are different every time. If you want to be perfect, You must do a solid job of collecting basic data. Some superficial data can be taken care of by machines, but deeper things must be grasped by oneself. A mental database must be established. Otherwise, one cannot be called a qualified creator. Yes, the words above were said by Colonel Shung. Artisan? Was this a specialized profession? Luo Nan's mind was filled with doubts, but Liang Lu had already taken the first step to express his astonishment. You have a built-in reactor? Do you need it this early? Oh, it's a night level. Luo Nan, who was lying on the operating console, subconsciously raised his body for a moment. He controlled himself half a second later. This was the first time he had exposed himself ever since he seized this so-called night-level colonizing basic biochemical reactor. He just didn't expect that this first time would be in a game setting. That's right. Based on the information and data he had stored and collected, the simulated game setting would not be strange. It would not be strange for his background to be completely emptied out. He was just scaring himself. Plus, the mode of chaos simulation seemed to naturally be able to rationalize all factors. Liang Lu quickly found a reason for this situation. The structure is relatively new, but it's a defective product. Where did you get it from? Is it legal? Have you registered it yet? Yes, it even has a built-in layout function. Electromagnetic direction? Liang Lu found a registration entry that even Luo Nin didn't know about. He went oh my twice, his mood fluctuating. Speaking of which, you're quite wealthy. You're a night level. Even if it's a damaged night level, it's still a night level. There are only 2 Spire Nobles and 10 titled Nobles in this base. Luo Nan's game character responded, equipment and title are different. It's different. But for equipment to sink to this level really makes people jealous. Logically speaking, without the strength of the Celestial Stairway or an endogenous spirit core, it would be impossible to activate it. That's right. You're only using it as an auxiliary equipment to be activated by external devices. What a waste of God's gift. What a waste of God's gift. Liang Lu had long forgotten what she was supposed to do. She looked at the structure and data of the night-level biochemical furnace on the scanner. She was both envious and jealous. She clicked her tongue in wonder. She hated that she could not turn Luo Nan over and properly dissect and research the region of Luo Nan's cloak. In the end, Luo Nan had to remind him, Master Liang Lu, the dynamo core. However, Liang Lu even had the thought of giving up halfway. If I still implant an ordinary dynamo core with a night-grade reactor, then that would be a real waste of God's gift. Liang Lu was, after all, a cultured person. He quickly realized his unprofessional behavior and coughed twice. In the end, he still could not help but say, I'm sorry. These words might not be very appropriate. Can I take a photo as a souvenir? I mean, can we keep the image of the structure and do some follow-up research? Of course. Luo Nin still hasn't figured it out. It was unclear whether or not the Liang Lu before his eyes was a product pieced together from information. But he always felt that the night-level endogenous basic biochemical reactor and other alien civilization creations that he had received had some sort of property relationship with the higher life forms of the civilization, especially those that were related to Earth. As long as the other party had good intentions, he did not mind returning the object to its rightful owner in this manner. Liang Lu did not know of Luo Nan's evaluation criteria, but he was overjoyed by Luo Nan's permission. After obtaining Luo Nan's permission once more, he downloaded all the information related to the reactor from a scanner. Then he patted his chest and said, I will definitely research it properly. I will not fail you. I will strive to restore this treasure to its original state as soon as possible. I didn't entrust it to you. Luo Nan was speechless for a time, and the recruit before his eyes was already full of motivation. He operated the surrounding instruments and equipment with more than double the enthusiasm. The words that came out of his mouth were 10 times more than before. I still believe that it will be very hard for an ordinary peripheral dynamo core to display the potential of your night-level reactor. But right now, don't bite off more than you can chew. If you really can operate this reactor, then Sergeant Major Mail will most likely enlist you into the frontline defense force. Speaking of which, if you have the support of an external device, how long can you last? With the external neuron, why would he need any external devices? It was just that the structure of the electromagnetic muscle membrane wasn't up to par. The material craftsmanship wasn't up to standard. Luonin had consulted Dean Wan on this topic, but there was no response for the time being. Luonin used the average time taken in combat to respond, 20 seconds. He originally wanted to say a minute and a half, but he changed it to the unit of time here when the words were on the tip of his tongue. Liang Lu laughed, taking this as an expression of Luo Nan's stubbornness. Liang Lu consoled him with good intentions. With your current level of ability, 10 seconds is already quite amazing. However, on the battlefield, a 10-second burst of power is meaningless. Unless you're a suicide squad, the commanding officers still need everyone to have a sustained and stable output. You coming here was the correct choice. Laying out the electromagnetic field was very popular in the Beehive. Also, don't rely too much on external objects. It's not that I'm being sour, but it's a bit too early for you to have an internalized reactor. Looking at the state of your body, your internal cultivation is already quite solid. Even if you haven't reached the stage of laying out the technique, why haven't you done this step of forming the furnace? No matter how amazing the night-level reactor is, it's still an external device. Only with your own foundation can you have it. Forming the furnace, Luo Nin barely managed to ask what the forming the furnace laying technique was. Luckily, Liang Lu had already sorted out his logic by now. He clapped his hands and apologized over and over. I almost forgot that you're a member of the 100-year sequence. You haven't achieved racial gene pool optimization yet. It's hard to avoid wasting a period of time. Speaking of which, how long has it been since you guys entered the 100-year sequence? Luo Nin nearly stumbled with this question. Luckily, Liang Lu directly went to search for information at this time. Luo Nin didn't know where Liang Lu got this information from, but he sighed with regret. Only 30 years? In other words, there's still 3 or 4 generations of time. It's not easy. The 30 years Liang Lu spoke of was obviously referring to the units here. Converted to Earth time, it was around 50 years. From the perspective of Earth, the so-called 100-year sequence was the 150-year sequence. And this 30 years already covered the entire process from the era of distortion to the present age. Oh, the 30 years given by the simulator. Was this the standard? Luo Nin didn't understand half of it. He couldn't help but ask, do we have to endure for 100 years? Liang Lu sighed, laying out the technique like a pass, piling up corpses like a mountain. These aren't just words. It's extremely difficult to break through the inherent logic of genetic evolution. It requires the correct direction of evolution, a perfect research system of genetic science, a powerful social mobilization force, and an extremely bitter sacrifice, including life and morality. No one is willing to pay such a great sacrifice. But if we want to surmount the natural danger of racial evolution, we must do so. Actually, Luo Nin didn't quite understand what Liang Lu was saying, but he could already feel the heavy weight within. There was a moment of silence. Liang Lu slapped Luo Nin's shoulder when he saw this. Don't worry too much about this. I'm talking about the public structure. Of course it's difficult. If you want to evolve yourself, opportunities are very important. Just by looking at the reaction furnace, I can tell that you have luck. Who knows, you might have some accomplishments. The battlefield is a good place to render meritorious service. If you can become a meritorious subject of the Empire in time, you might be able to influence the decisions of the upper echelons. A portion of resources will be tilted toward your race. And no matter what, you guys are the first to enter the 100-year sequence since the beginning of Sin Calamity era. The role of a benchmark. Understand? Luo Nin felt the background of reality and illusion interweave. His thoughts drifted, and he actually forgot to respond. In his daze, he heard Liang Lu say, "At this time, you need to study hard. Consider yourself lucky. You've been promoted to a master in both configuration and deployment. You've learned 60 to 70% of his abilities. Whether it's for self-evolution or for feedback to your race, you'll benefit endlessly." Luo Nin subconsciously grunted and said, "Thank you." Liang Lu laughed. Let's talk about something else. Let's properly install the external dynamo core right now. Calm your mind first. Don't be too nervous. Do you want to listen to some music? Without waiting for Luo Nan's response, a soothing and melodious melody rang out in the cold and hard workshop that was connected by many worker bees. With Luo Nan's barely entry-level ability to appreciate music, he could roughly discern that the opening portion of the melody was accompanied by a plucked string instrument. It was cold and clear, and the resonance was very strong. It was a bit like a guitar. It was quite suitable for Rue when to play. Just as this thought flashed through Luo Nan's mind, he heard a clear and somewhat inexperienced voice cut in. The voice sang within the plucking sound. There were few embellishments in the technique, but the natural resonance and the metallic ringing at the end complemented the melodious melody. The voice was clearly right in front of Luo Nan, but there was a sense of spaciousness that spread out. It was so spaciousness that it was a bit sad. Then why couldn't he understand it? Luo Nan listened to a few lines before discovering that the singer was using a language that he had never come into contact with before. This is Miss Suyi's Crimson Wheel. It's a song written especially for our concealed light galaxy. Liang Lu raised his head as he spoke these words. The impassioned accompaniment of a march broke the soothing prelude at nearly the same time. It was still the same tune, but the metallic texture of the singer's voice was like a sharp blade that cleaved open the wild winds of the wilderness. It dominated the entire melody. Liang Lu clenched his fists tightly amidst the song. The Crimson Wheel rift, the demon eye of deep space. We're going to break through that place and seal off the greatest spreading grounds of evil poison. We're going to break through the shackles of the godly kingdom of the heavens. We're going to reorganize our territory and restore our glory. When that time comes, Miss Suyi won't need to drift about amidst the flames of war. When that time comes, Luo Nan was a bit stupefied. He admitted that this song was very ear-grabbing, but where were Liang Lu's emotions and emotions reflected?